Is that done, Katie? No, the camera hasn't come on yet.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay, Chris?
Thank you, Clerk. Okay, good morning, members. Máidín Mai agus to Fáilte Rove. We do have a quorum, and I now call the meeting to order and welcome all of you to the 44th meeting of the Committee for Communities. Can I remind anyone in the public gallery there that mobile phones must be turned off? Mobile tablet devices can, however, be used through a Wi-Fi connection, and all devices should be muted. Password details are available in the gallery for anyone wanting to connect to Assembly's Wi-Fi network, and no recordings or photographs may be taken. Can I also remind members about the protocols regarding the use of electronic devices? Please switch all mobile devices to airplane mode and activate Wi-Fi connection. And please also use tablets discreetly in a way which does not interfere with proceedings, and please be aware of the cameras and sensitivity of the microphones throughout the course of the meeting. So members, agenda item. Yes, just to indicate, members, we have two members attending via Zoom today, Sean Mulholland and Morris Bradley. Moving on to members to agenda item 1, declaration of interests. Do members of any interest wish to declare in advance of today's meeting? I just want to indicate in relation to a piece of correspondence that I am bringing forward a members' bill in relation to homelessness prevention. So just to declare that. Okay, members, item 2 is apologies. Clerk, are you aware of any?
No.
Members aware of any apologies? No, thank you. Chair's business then, members. I wanted just to advise that the call for evidence on the sign language bill closes tomorrow, and I would like to encourage as many people as possible to reply to this, as we have already seen the value of engagement on this bill at our evidence session last week, which was very, very well received. Also to indicate that this is Deaf Awareness Week, and I wanted to note that there was a very well attended drop-in session on beginners British and Irish Sign Language in the Blue Flax here yesterday that some members attended, and very, very welcome to see that type of ongoing awareness and education and information on that issue. I want to also acknowledge that one of our members here has completed last weekend the Belfast Marathon, which is a significant achievement, and well done, Brian.
Thank you.
And congratulations to anyone who completed or took part in any way in the marathon. And finally, just to acknowledge the Irish Cup final and our own Dungannon Swifts, it was a historic first win in that cup final, and to wish them well, and to wish indeed the Dungannon Lady Hockey team, which is playing this weekend in a significant final also. So it's I think a very unique or very relevant demonstration of the power of sport to bring joy and celebration to towns and villages across the area. So we'll have Brian first and then Melissa.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, for your congratulations. And I just want to put in the record that I thought the Belfast Marathon was the best ever event in terms of numbers participating and also out supporting the event. So congratulations to the organisers and City Council and all who supported it. But also want to there was the sad news the following day of the death of John Allen, who was the chairman of the Marathon Board for 6 years and was a director since the marathon started in 1982. He had cancer and had been carrying on in his role while he fought that battle. But he left a very strong legacy, and maybe just record our sympathy to his family and colleagues on that sad news.
Yep, thank you, Brian. Melissa.
And Chair, I think maybe we should also acknowledge the Tyrone under-20s who were crowned Ulster champions again for the third time in 4 years.
Yep.
And they went to the All-Ireland semi-final, in fact, this Sunday against Kerry. So again, to wishing them all the best.
Melissa, and thanks everyone. Moving on then to agenda item 4 is draft minutes, and can I refer members to the draft minutes from our meeting of the 1st of May, and those are contained at page 7 there of your meeting pack. Are members content to agree the minutes of the 1st of May as drafted?
Agreed.
Thank you, members. Matters arising then, members, you have been provided with a summary table of 2 matters arising at page 20. Can I ask if members, if you have any comments or issues you want to draw out or highlight, or seek briefings in relation to either 5.2 or 5.3? No? Go ahead, Kelly.
Just to say that on 5.2, I welcome that. It was a bit difficult, I think, would be the best way to describe it, when Northern Ireland Water was here, when they confirmed that one of their priorities wasn't to meet the housing objectives outlined in the housing strategy. So it's good to actually, and to be honest, I welcome very much the previous Minister, John O'Dowd, and the current Minister's work on infrastructure to ensure that Northern Ireland Water isn't going to delay our house building programme, because we desperately need that. And then moving on to the terms of reference for the co-design programmes, I know I'd circulated, or I'd asked the clerks to circulate, which they kindly did, a civil service instruction sort of, or outline guide on co-design. My concern is, just at this stage, Chair, is the co-design paper. It's very good, but the production, it's co-design and co-production. The co-production seems to have been dropped, and that might highlight a few things just about how decisions are taken on those. It was never meant to set aside people and to make decisions without their input. And I know that the Minister is engaging with disability groups on the Disability Action Plan and the Employment Plan, but it might be useful then if we follow up, just to ask for further detail about the co-production side of things.
Yeah, members content we seek that clarification. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So thanks, members, then otherwise content. And moving on to table papers, then at page 3 there's a summary table of a further item under matters arising. So that's item 5.5. And members, you'll recall at our meeting on the 13th of March, it was agreed the committee would write to the equivalent committees in Scotland and Wales on the potential for a joint devolved committee response on proposed UK welfare reforms. The committee has received responses now from Scotland and Wales. Scotland is proposing to consider the matter further following a roundtable session with stakeholders on 15th of May and contact us then. Are members therefore content to note the responses this time and await further correspondence from Scotland?
Yeah.
Yep, thank you. Members, any other comments in relation to 5.5? No, thank you. Correspondence, agenda item 6 then is correspondence, members, and the correspondence memo is at page 27. So we'll go through those items by number in a single group and ask if you want to draw out, highlight or seek briefings in relation to any specific item of correspondence. So can I ask if members have any comments on items 6.2 to 6.6, please? Kelly, yeah, go ahead.
Just 6.2, the Simon Communities piece that we've got there. There's a number of I suppose, recommendations and comments that they have made there. I was just wondering if we could write to the department to ask for their comments on that, or if there's any actions intended to deal with some of those proposals.
Yeah, and I should probably just indicate that, as indicated in members' declaration of interest, my private members' bill is actually moving to extend the statutory intervention period by the Housing Executive, and that consultation is going live as we speak, or today. I certainly hope it's out today. But I think the clarification from the comments from the department will be important as well, if members are content to agree that. Yeah. Anything else within 6.2, 6.6, or members otherwise? Sian, go ahead. Yeah, Sian, go ahead.
Yeah, Chair, it's just on 6.4. Thank you. It's just on 6.4, the Northern Ireland Children's Commissioner for young people, children and young people. Really, it was just around the lack of EQIA and the CRIAs involved in the budget process of departments. And I'm wondering if we can ask the department whether they have considered doing any form of risk assessment or an impact assessment for children when they look at their budget, particularly around the lack of an anti-poverty strategy. And how that is impacting on children and young people. The only department that seems to have engaged with the CRIA process has been TEO, and I think it would be really good practice if the Communities Committee were doing something similar. So it was just really to ask if the department can consider engaging in that impact assessment for young people, and also around an EQIA, specifically around the impact on the lives of children and young people through the work of the department.
Yep, thank you, Sian. Members content that we seek that?
Agreed.
Yep. Okay. Moving on then, members, to items in your table papers of correspondence, which are page 12, and those are items 6.8 to 6.12. Do members have any items there that they want to highlight or draw out anything on?
No.
So members otherwise content with the
Right.
memorandum?
Sorry, Chair, just
Go
jumped
ahead,
to my
Kim.
mind. 6.9 on that job start 50. I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I know that a few of us have been contacted by people asking about the 50 plus programme. So we welcome that completely. That now will be proceeding, because there are a number of people, especially when DWP are talking about the sanctions for those on universal credit, that for those over 50 now have opportunities to enter the labour market or go into a different job maybe in the labour market. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. Okay, members. So members otherwise content with the actions as noted on the two memos. Thank you both. Or thank you all. Members, moving on to agenda item 7, departmental briefing on budget 2025 to 26, initial decisions. So papers for this agenda item start there in your packs, members, at page 212, and I'd now like to welcome the following departmental officials to the meeting. So, okay, we'll take a short pause. Just
intro that.
yeah. So just by way of introduction, members, the department has provided a written briefing covering an update on the 2024-25 position and initial budget allocations for 2025 to 2026. These initial allocations are subject to change and will be finalised when we consider the main estimates in June. There's a memo from the clerk at page 21 of your table papers to accompany the briefing. So we'll pause a few moments there. Do we need to come out of broadcasting just for a couple of minutes? Yeah, so we'll suspend just for a couple of minutes with your agreement, members. Yep, thank you. Okay.
Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29. Sound.
Back in broadcast. Okay, members, so thank you, and we're resuming there at agenda 7, departmental briefing on budget 2025-26, and I welcome the following departmental officials to the meeting. So we have John Greer. John is Deputy Secretary of Corporate Services Group, Cathy Sands, Finance Director, and Cherry Arnold, Finance Director. So, John, I think it's yourself who's going to make the opening statement, and then we'll move to questions.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, members, and thanks for the opportunity to come here and brief you on the draft allocations for the 25-26 budget. Before we begin, I'll just do a quick recap on our closing position for 24-25. You may recall we were provided by the Executive 913 million of resource departmental expenditure and 197.5 million of capital and 25.2 of financial transactions capital. As well as that, Treasury supplied us with 19.6 billion of annually managed expenditure for a range of benefit delivery. Based on current forecasts, we're expected to come in with a balanced budget, which is obviously very good news, and we're working on our provisional outturn, which is due with the Department of Finance by the 14th of May. So on the 19th of December, the Executive set the draft budget and began a 12-week consultation. That draft budget proposed 929 million of resource departmental expenditure, 270 million of capital, and 48 million of financial transactions capital. And Cathy and Cherry provided a briefing to you on the 27th of February. The Executive agreed to draft final budget allocations on the 3rd of April, and it provided 938 million of non-ring-fenced departmental expenditure and 270 million of capital and 48.1 million of financial transactions capital. You'll see there was an increase between the December number and this number, and that was largely due to an additional award of 8.4 million to recognise the pay award that was settled with unions for the civil service. It is important to say that does not cover the full pressure that is presented by that pay award. Obviously, as well, the executive also agreed an additional 2.8 million for national insurance contributions, and that'll come through the June monitoring round. Just to say, the full pressure from national insurance contributions changes and increase for the department is over 6 million. So obviously there's a significant pressure stemming from that. Taking all of those in total, that provides 940.9 million of resource departmental expenditure to the department. Capital remained at 48.1 million, or 270 million or 48.1 million of FTC. So in terms of breaking this down further, of the 940 million, 184 is earmarked for the department. That's positive. That's our full requirement that we requested met in full. And of course, that's to deliver housing benefit rates, existing welfare mitigations, and de-rating grants payments to councils. In addition, the department bid for ring-fence funding to support the recruitment of staff to deliver benefits of 16.9 million. We are particularly pleased that this was met in full, and this is earmarked funding to recruit up to 400 staff to support benefit delivery. I will say that it is forecast that will help us recruit up to 400 posts. That will be challenging given the current labour market. I also have to point out that is not recurrent funding. So we have spoke to colleagues in the Department of Finance. We would be keen for your support in this going forward into the establishment of next year's budget. In terms of non-ring-fence departmental expenditure, we submitted bids totalling 160.6 million and also notified the Department of Finance of a further 12.2 million requirement for the department and its ALBs relating to the pay settlement for a total of 172.8 million. In response, the department received a total of 756 million. So obviously taking out the earmarked requirement, and that included 19.2 million of a general allocation. With this settlement, the department faces a shortfall of 98.6 million, 12% against the stated requirement of 855.4 million. So I guess in summary, what we're saying is these increases are extremely modest when contrasted with the pressures that we're facing in terms of funding our ALBs, funding all of our existing service, our statutory obligations. And this largely means that our additional investment in our services will not be possible apart from a few exceptions, and investment will largely remain at 24-25 levels. We recognise that the funding situation is difficult for all departments, and of course welcome the allocation of 19.2 million, but as I've said, would caution that this is set against the context of a pay award and the pressure stemming from the additional national insurance contributions. Of course, it is proposed that funding is allocated to initially cover the administration of social security benefits, pensions, child maintenance service, support social and affordable housing, urban regeneration and local government, and of course provide support for the voluntary and community sector, sports and arts and the language sector, not to mention heritage, our arm's length bodies and of course PRONI. In light of this position, to ensure the continuity of existing statutory and public service delivery, the department's allocations will reflect the following decisions. As I've said, the 16.9 million will allow us to progress, and we are doing that with the recruitment of 400 posts in the area of benefit delivery, provide support to the voluntary and community sector, provide an additional 3.7 million to DFC's arm's length bodies, obviously reflecting the pressures that I've mentioned, which are on them as they are on us, and obviously continue the service delivery support for libraries NI and national museums. We'll continue to provide support for homeless through our Supporting People programme. We are considering a range of new employment support interventions. We consider those as vitally important given the outworkings of the Green Paper and welfare reform and so on, and they are currently being worked on. We are in the draft allocation supporting discretionary support grants set at 25.5 million for 25/6 here. In terms of resource funding to councils and other funding organisations, as I've said, they'll largely stay at 24-25 levels. In terms of capital, so we received 270 million, which is significantly higher than 24-25 level, which was 133 million, but significantly below our bid of 431.3 million, and below our bid by some 160 million. It is important, and you'll be aware that as we deploy more capital, obviously we create a longer tail. So in terms of our total inescapable and pre-committed commitments going into this financial year, the total for that is 156 million. Of that 270 million, 50 million is for earmarked allocation executive programmes such as the City Deals, Casement Park, the Northern Ireland Football Fund and the Inclusive Future Funding. So taking the 50 off the 270, you've got 220 left, and then taking the 156 off, obviously then you're down in a much smaller number. Now, as part of the 270, received 100 million of reinvestment and reform initiative funding, which was supplied to the department. This will be used entirely to cover the 106 million of a tail that we have stemming from our commitments made last year in the Social Development Housing Programme. So our intention is that we will use the remaining capital to continue to cover our statutory obligations and our contractual obligations, such as building safety and so on. But obviously, as I've said, this level of funding falls well short and does not allow us to recognise or fund other high priority projects. Given the inescapable that I've mentioned and the earmark, the department has 77.3 million of funding and capital available for deployment. So the draft capital allocations are as follows: 63 million to support new social homes. That will allow somewhere in the region of 1,000 new homes to begin in 25-26. You'll recognise that is significantly short of our target of 2,000 homes. We will, of course, be submitting bids in the year to the executive to try and close that gap. In terms of hitting that target of 2,000 homes, to cover the 2,000 homes and meet our inescapable requirement, we would need 230 million in total. So it's very clear there when you contrast that number with the allocation that we received, there's significant pressure there. We are also funding 2.5 million for affordable warmth projects, which will allow approximately 480 new approvals for those people who are below a 23,000 per annum income threshold, to allow them to benefit from investments to make their home more energy efficient. We are investing 4.2 million in a range of regeneration and neighbourhood renewal projects, and they're currently being worked through at the minute in terms of assessing their readiness with regard to statutory obligations and so on. And we are intending to deploy 6.7 million of capital in the fields of culture, heritage and sports to promote well-being amongst all the Section 75 groups. Obviously, you'll be aware that this is all subject to the outworkings of the Equality Impact Assessment. Our intention is to launch that on the 12th of May. My rough estimate is if we launch on the 12th of May, that will close sometime around the 25th of July. We will analyse the responses and then obviously reposition any draft allocations to give consideration to where we need to deploy mitigations. Obviously, Kathy and Cherry are here to very ably support me, and delighted to take questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. And I suppose just initially to note and welcome that the department's expectation that it will deliver a balanced budget for 2024-25 and within the resource and capital tolerances. The paper mentions the cost of repairs following Storm Eowyn. Can you tell us where those costs primarily fell, and what are the plans for building resistance in the face of climate change going forward?
So the costs for Storm Eowyn were used obviously for the CEFA scheme, were also used for NIHE maintenance and for some repairs across the DFC estate. I'm sorry, Chair, you've asked me there about sort of climate change and about building resistance.
Future plans for resilience.
I would probably need to get some of our climate change colleagues to come back and to give us some further detail, because that wouldn't be my forte.
Okay.
If I could, Chair, so obviously there is there's work on the department's climate change plan. Again, this is some of the systemic challenges that the executive and we're all going to face as society, but the costs for those types of mitigations relating to resilience and adaptation are very, very significant. But as Cathy has said, colleagues from our climate division would be much better equipped than I am to talk about the specifics in that.
Okay, thank you. So there's an additional allocation there being proposed for museums and libraries, and it refers to key cultural institutions. How much is the allocation that's being made in that respect, and is that limited to museums and libraries, or how are key cultural institutions being defined?
So a number of these allocations are still being worked through with the Minister. So there are additional monies currently being looked at for both National Museums at Northern Ireland and also our Heritage Division, obviously to support the very important work that they do in restoring and maintaining and repairing our heritage assets, but they're still being worked through just right now.
So you don't know what the allocation is yet?
No.
And in terms of the definition of key cultural institutions, how is that being defined?
I wouldn't be able to answer that question. I'm happy to consult with colleagues and bring something back to the committee in writing on that.
Okay, we had actually been expecting a briefing on heritage. That briefing has been postponed twice now. So if you could get back to them and say we do want some, because it is, I have to say, a bit concerning that budget allocations are being made without any sense for the committee of what the purpose is or what the rationale is for any of those allocations. So
and apologies, Chair, I wasn't aware that there'd been two requests that had previously been cancelled or postponed. I'll take that back. You'll also be aware that the department is working on a strategy relating to culture, heritage and arts, which I imagine will provide a policy basis and a definition for those organisations going forward. But I'll certainly take that back and see how we can bring that briefing forward to you.
Okay, thank you. So just the final one for me before I start going to members then for now. So this morning we received a report just from the Simon community on homelessness, and their key ask was for ring-fence funding for homelessness prevention. Just to indicate that I am bringing forward a members' bill on homelessness prevention. But Simon community contend that anything else other than ring-fencing is crisis management and not actually dealing with the problem. Has that been factored into the funding for homelessness and supporting people programme?
It has been, Chair, and just to say as well, obviously Minister has said that his desire is to have ring fence funding, and that is one of the proposals in terms of the budget for 25-26. It won't be ring fenced in the sense of DOF ring fence, but it'll be absolutely ring fenced in terms of our department, and the accountability will be on that individual pot of money separate from temporary accommodation and the community prevention piece. It'll be an allocated amount for strategic prevention.
Okay, thank you. And they also asked the department to explore the pooling of resources between departments for homeless prevention. Is there any work being done on that, or is that being looked at, to your knowledge?
I couldn't comment on that specifically. I would prefer that my my colleagues in housing come back to you in terms of that one. Okay. We'll maybe take that as a reaction to follow up. Okay, listen, I'll go to members. So at this stage I have our Deputy Chair first, Nicola Brogan, and then I'm going to Shan and then Kelly. So
thanks, Chair, and thank you folks for your briefing there. I just want to ask about the voluntary community sector support. So you've got a paragraph there and you've outlined the different challenges that the voluntary community sector themselves are facing, mostly with the likes of the living wage and the national insurance contributions, which has been well rehearsed at this stage. So from that paragraph you're saying there's £2.8 million going. Is that going directly towards the voluntary community sector to help them with national insurance contributions? It's going directly to them. will this meet the needs of the community and voluntary sector in regard to that?
So what I will say in terms of assessing the amount that was given to them, Minister was made aware of their need, and this is covering the need. I can't say that it will cover all of the need, but it's certainly a very positive story in terms of the voluntary community sector. So if you bear back to 24-25, they got an extra 1.45 million, and that has been protected again moving forward into 25-26, and this funding is on top of that.
If I speak frankly, none of the awards are matching in full the pressure that is coming through either the NICS pay award or the change in national insurance contributions, because there's simply not the money available. So a proportionate and fair approach has been taken to that.
You mentioned, John, in your opening remarks about, so that you mentioned the 2.8 million for that, and then but £6 million pressures. Is that for the departments to cover their costs for national insurance contributions, or is that for the community and voluntary sector?
So I would need to go back to my notes. I think that is 6 million for the department.
Okay.
So I do have the figure. So where are we here? So national insurance contribution pressure for local councils, VCSE and supporting people is over 15 million.
Thank you. I just want to ask you then about Barnett consequentials. Are you expecting any this year essentially, and how will you prioritise them if you do receive any?
So this is obviously a subject of much discussion in the department, especially within the horizon of the Green Paper. Historically, why we are both encouraged and pleased and I guess grateful of the 16.9 million of earmarked funding that we've received to recruit 400 posts in benefit delivery. Historically, we have not received the proportionate Barnett consequential that have came through for benefit delivery, which is why we're currently not maintaining parity with GB in terms of benefit delivery, in terms of job coach attendance, support for disabled people, and so on. Obviously, the need to reflect parity going forward with the Green Paper coming down will be critical if we're to provide support to people that are the most impacted of this. But obviously that is a matter for the executive to decide if those unhypothecated Barnetts are assigned to the department. But we will be, of course, as we have consistently, stating our case on that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Thank you. Just one final question, and that's about, you already mentioned this too, about the Supporting People programme. So there's an additional 3.7 million allocated to that. How will that look in practice?
Sorry, can I just say it's 3.7 million across homelessness and supporting people. So what's in there is actually a specific allocation for strategic prevention of 2.5 million. There's $1 million for supporting people pipeline projects, and that's to allow it that wider piece and will tie in with homelessness. And there's a specific allocation of a small amount for a specific homeless foundation project as well.
That's great. Thank you. Sure.
Okay, thank you. So Sian then, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for both the paper that we've received and for your presentation today. It kind of follows on a little bit from Nicola's question around the Green Paper. You know, there's a few things there that I'm a bit concerned about in terms of no ring fence funding. The in-year bids are a bit of a high-risk strategy when it comes to that. The lack of equality analysis that we seem to be getting through. At this moment in time, we still don't know the figures of exactly how many people are going to be impacted. And the fact that discretionary support is flatlined. I suppose it's just really to ask, what assessment has DFC carried out so far in terms of their budget that would allow for any kind of slippage or any money to actually be placed into the mitigation of what we're going to see. And John, you spoke there about the fact that we aren't maintaining parity with the support systems, the support net that is needed and is being delivered in GB. So I'm just wondering what position are we actually in when it comes to money further down within this year, regarding anything that comes through in the Green Paper?
Yeah, so I'm going to bring Terry in because Terry is very across this area. So there is a ton of work going on in the department with regard to the Green Paper. So it is very complex trying to map out the impact of this. Colleagues across the department, but specifically in our analytics division, I've been working with colleagues in DWP to look at the very specific impact of this. We hope to have early numbers of that probably towards the end of next week. In terms of what we're looking at with the budget, members will be aware that to fully mitigate the impact of this, as we currently know it, looking at what's in the green paper, would be certainly beyond the reach of the department and probably beyond the reach of the executive without some very, very difficult decisions. Our minister is obviously very across this issue, and we as officials are working with minister, and I referenced that we're considering a number of approaches for job support programs and so on. And again, we are looking at what we can do without any additional monies being provided via BARDA Consequential to attempt to provide support to those that are likely to be the most impacted by this. Cherry, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, we've seen some very early figures in terms of actually a read across of the UK estimates, and it was talking about impacts of over 150 million a year by 29-30. That's reduced benefit spend. So obviously alongside that, it did mention about additional funding coming for employment support. The department will be bidding for that. There will be BARDA Consequential of that. Our minister is really keen to support anyone that is impacted in terms of employment support. So obviously we'll align our bids with the programmes that DWP are delivering. We're also looking at this year at how we maximise our own support that's available currently within the department, but we do have a very limited budget. We are planning in-year bids, and obviously the committee is very conscious that we have lost the funding for our job start schemes. We are keen to see what we can stand up internally, but we will need additional support from the executive if we are going to deliver something meaningful to support anyone that is impacted.
Okay, and then slightly linked to that, I suppose, is obviously the executive's under legal duty to deliver the anti-poverty strategy, but there's no ring fence funding in the 25-26 Department for Communities budget. So I suppose it's just really to ask, how does the department propose to meet its statutory obligations without that dedicated funding line for any anti-poverty intervention? And I'm not sure whether you can answer this, but it was just whether you have any awareness of when a resourced delivery plan would be put into action for such a strategy.
So obviously there's work ongoing on the anti-poverty strategy, and there's a cross-departmental working group. What I'd prefer to do is ask colleagues to come back and brief on that. I know that there are ongoing conversations to that regard, with regard to pooling resources and dedicating them to anti-poverty measures. Of course, the department already does a range of programmes and initiatives under its statutory obligations that have an impact on poverty, and despite a challenging budget position, we will remain committed to that. And as Cherry has referenced in terms of the context of welfare reform, we are always looking to see how we can utilise our finite resources to address those things. But Shan, I don't have any specifics on that, and I'll have a conversation with my colleague and understand if there is a briefing scheduled, and if not, when that can be arranged to come back, and that specific detail to be looked upon for the committee.
It is a genuine worry, and it's something that has been referenced to me on a number of occasions by anti-poverty campaigners and organisations that, yes, a strategy is fine, but when we're actually looking at a budget and there's nothing specifically new or innovative that's coming through in the budget, that is a concern. My last question is just around we've spoken in committee before, it's around cultural and the Arts Council for Northern Ireland. The big concern is just how long it's taken to get those letters of offer out, and I'm just wondering, in terms of the status of us in the current process, they haven't received confirmation of their budget, obviously, because it's still going through, but I'm just wondering, why is there such a delay that organisations are only getting their allocations so late into the financial year? And I suppose, just do we have a timeline for when exactly they'll be confirmed. So the organisations that are funded by our arm's length bodies will know what their allocation is for the year ahead, so they can timely plan.
So what I can say at the minute, Shan, is obviously the ALBs have been given what we would call an opening indicative allocation of the first quarter to get them started. Obviously, we're a committee today, a briefing news, guys. The intention is that now the Minister has, approved the budget position, that we will get letters out to the ALBs and the voluntary and community sector imminently. As in either if it's not today or tomorrow, it'll be at the very start of next week.
Great, that's great.
Just,
Thank you very much.
just to caution as well, but that does not necessarily imply a direct correlation with the annual funding letters from Arts Council going to the recipients. So Shan, I'll certainly take that back and try to get confirmation of a timeline on that.
Just a real concern that organisations are dipping into their reserves right now without any kind of inclination of how much they're getting, and it's really worrying for people.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. And just as a follow-up to Sean's around the anti-poverty strategy, which is a real concern and has been a concern for some time, and pressing. But I note with concern you'd mentioned in your briefing, John, that the allocation to councils would remain at 24-25 level. Are there any plans to develop a specific budget line to councils to assist in the anti-poverty strategy?
Chair, I would need to take that away and liaise with colleagues. I'm not across that level of detail, but happy to provide that back to the committee in writing.
Okay, and just to note that is effectively a cut to councils if it's remaining at that level. So that's hugely concerning and one I'm sure that we will be picking up on again. Okay, so I'm going then at this point. Then I have Kelly, Brian, and Melissa. So Kelly, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to each of you for coming along. Normally we're in a terrible place, but it actually seems like quite a lot of what you've bid for is there, although the pressures have definitely not gone away. Can I go back to the 24-25, and as you'll recognise this question from previous committees, discretionary support in 24-25, I take it there was an overspend and not any underspend?
The Minister increased the budget for discretionary support grants to 25.5 million. So we're on track largely to spend the budget. We're still working through provisional outturn. I think there's a slight reduction. I think we're coming in just slightly under, but it's minimal. And going forward for 25-26, the budget again is being held at 25.5 million for discretionary support. In addition to that, you also have loans. Yeah. So we know it's helped over, in terms of the grants, it's helped over 40,000 people the 24-25 year.
Because I know in the past where we used to have there would be underspend, we know that it's right up, and the fact that ESA has moved to UC is kicking in. We're expecting probably the amount of people to be applying for discretionary support and asking for it will keep at that level or higher.
It's our discretionary support grant budget is significantly higher than what it was previously. Our previous historic baseline was 13.7 million. We also have then, in addition to that, the Universal Credit Contingency Fund. So it's sitting at 6.2.
Oh, it's separate to then discretionary?
It's separate, it's 6.2 million. So we have really good processes in place. So we monitor that on a weekly basis because obviously it is demand led, so it could fluctuate very quickly. So there's a very good control kept to that to ensure that we are forecasting an overspend for any reason, that we can put mechanisms in place and bid for any money in year if needed.
I know I'd noted on page 6 of your paper, it's page 220 in our pack, that the continuing as far as possible to limit all discretionary departmental expenditure. Would that include then the discretionary support? Not that one. That's not what that refers to then.
No, that's not what. No,
okay.
In terms of discretionary support, it's fine. That's obviously a scheme that's in place to help
Oh
those
no,
in need.
Thank you, Chair. That's brilliant to hear. I just wanted to ask you as well, the community and voluntary sector having that 2.8 million that heads towards their, obviously it doesn't meet all of their costs for the national insurance contribution. I'm just wondering, the community and voluntary sector, while it falls under the Department for Communities, there are obviously bodies of the community and voluntary sector don't receive funding from the Department for Communities. Has there been a discussion with the other finance officers to ensure that those community and voluntary sector bodies that are out with yourselves are the same policy is being followed elsewhere in finance, so that they're getting the national insurance or some contribution towards their national insurance pressures?
So I would say that this has been a conversation at the highest level. What I can confirm is that there's a coherence across the department and other funding bodies with regard to our approach.
Yeah. I know it's not for you guys with the account side of things, but it'd be lovely to see that joined up thinking across departments on this. I wanted to ask you a few technical questions, if you don't mind. We had received, as a committee, the Fiscal Council's report, and it mentioned in it concern about, and it wasn't necessarily concern about you guys directly, but it was about the processes, about fees and charges and how that can be improved for transparency. Has there been any indication from the Department of Finance of any different ways that they have to be reported or accounted for yourselves? And just think about pressure within the department.
No concern
Okay.
raised.
Okay. I know that the Fiscal Council had said to us it's not an issue directly for communities itself. It's just noted because communities does have fees and charges that come in, they would like to see more of where it was going to and how it's allocated out. And on that about allocations or potentially withholding money, has there been any further negotiations with the Treasury or outcome from the Treasury about keeping any of the recovered benefits found? I know that was ongoing, because that might help with some of the pressures. I don't expect it to be millions and millions, but it could help.
That's obviously in fraud and error, and obviously our investors have proposals, so the Minister is really keen to support those. And obviously he's met recently with the Finance Minister. We're looking to progress that. Obviously with Treasury, the money that we do spend within Northern Ireland in terms of tackling benefits, there's around about a 1 to 8 return. So it would be really good. And the Fresh Start agreement back in 2016 did outline the UK government agreement that we should be able to retain 50% if we can demonstrate. So, you know, in my view is we have demonstrated that we are delivering significant savings, and we obviously want to push that. But at this stage, there's no actual money coming back to Northern Ireland, which I would be keen to see.
Yeah, it's a significant amount.
I think it's safe to say there's been a number of approaches made to Department of Finance colleagues. Sherry referenced the recent bilateral between Minister O'Dowd and Minister Lyons, and this was one of the items on the agenda, and we continue to push for that, as well as the borrowing for the housing executive in those conversations with Treasury.
Can I check, is that a decision then that we can make within Northern Ireland as opposed to the Treasury giving permission for those?
No, Treasury will need to agree.
The Treasury still has to, so it would be Mr O'Dowd through Finance. And just want to check as well, the Housing Executive had been pushing in 24-25 for, bear with me if I get this terminology wrong, about the receipts from the sale of homes going back to them so that they could use that money for elsewhere. In 25-26, has there been any decision made on that yet?
House and land sales are come back to the department within the spending power of the department.
Okay, so I know the Housing Executive will probably reach out to us on that one again. And just finally then, the high priority products that you talked about that wouldn't be able to be delivered, so we're down 1,000 homes. Is there any other key products that can't be delivered? Because if we're sitting generally at the 24-25 level, is there anything else that as a committee we should sort of be mindful of that won't be able to be progressed?
I suppose obviously you've got the new build social homes is obviously a key for us, and I mean we're short by about 63 million to go into 25-26, and we will continue to bid for that at in-year monitoring. On top of that then the proposals at the minute for affordable warmth is we can't give them everything they've asked for. We're only able to give them about 2.5 million, which will allow about 480 approvals. So again we will look to bid for that at in-year monitoring. So that would be some of the key stuff, and inescapable we're able to cover. So the stuff then that we are not able to cover is more in the high priority schemes rather than the inescapable.
Because I'm just worried a wee bit about the Housing Executive. I know they receive their budget and they deal with maintenance themselves, but it's that retrofitting, the climate change piece that the Chair had brought up. I'm quite keen to see that. I appreciate that the pay increases and the national insurance hit for yourselves has caused an awful lot of pressure. So while it looks as if the department's getting slightly more money, really we're just working along there. I'm just worried that if there's a bid for in-year monitoring, depending on when that bid is actually accepted, what time of the year, it could even still prevent the start of new build homes because it'd be too late to get them on the ground with planning permission taking forever. Yeah.
I mean, I think the important thing is whenever we talk about new home starts, we're not talking about new home completions. And the important thing for us is, we can deploy the money to the programme at a very late stage, which allows then us to work to see that pipeline of homes come through, and that's the important thing. So I wouldn't be overly concerned about that, but the key priority for us is that the current level of homes that we're expected to build at this stage of the financial year is 50% against target, which is, yeah.
Thank you very much. I know that, especially given the fact that there's more work that needs to be done by the end of next week. Thank you very much for your time. I'm sure we will be talking to you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. And just to indicate, we will be getting a briefing from the department on 29th of May. We have a scheduled briefing on fraud and error, so just to flag that. Brian? Go
Thank you,
ahead,
Chair.
please.
Thank you, John, Kathy, Sherry, for your report and answers so far. I'm just going to ask some questions, just getting clarity. There's some welcome increases, in funding, but there's also that shortfall in the non-ring-fenced resource of 12%. So some of the increases are not confirmed at this stage, is my reading of it. So I'm just going to ask a few questions on that. The voluntary and community sector funding is now in place. The increase there, 2.8 million. Is the increase to the arm's length bodies, is that in place now?
That is in place.
That is in place, because it does say there that about it's being unable to provide increase in culture, arts, sports and heritage sectors. So is that separate funding that is also desired to be provided? Or?
That is separate, that is desired to be provided, and that's something that we're working through with the Minister at the minute, looking at additional funding for organisations in that space.
Okay, but the increase to the arm's length bodies is approved. Yeah. And is it similar with then homelessness and supporting people programme, that there is a certain increase approved, but the desire is to increase it further? Is that right? Or?
There's always a desire to increase it further, as Kathy referenced. This is a key priority, obviously, for the Minister, and he was very keen to provide the additional support that was needed to address homelessness at a strategic level in terms of prevention.
Right, but there is an increase that is currently in place for this new financial year. Okay. In terms of tackling fraud and error, again, that's on the list there where the department's not able to increase expenditure, or has there been an increase? And the main question I want to ask is, has a conversation happened with Treasury about retaining savings made to the public purse from tackling fraud and error for the Northern Ireland Block Grant, effectively, for other public services in Northern Ireland?
So I'm going to bring Cherry in, but in terms of that conversation with Treasury, so that conversation, there has been past conversations, and we're hoping to re-engage via colleagues in Department of Finance with Treasury on that Invest to Save programme, and Cherry has attended a recent bilateral between Minister O'Dowd and Minister Lyons, of which that was on the agenda, to re-engage with Treasury on that. Cherry, do you want to say any more?
Yeah, we did put in a bid for this year for tackling fraud and error investment. We didn't have anything met against the bid. We would like to put additional staff in place aligned with DWP and what they're doing in terms of party interventions to tackle and reduce fraud and error. We have put a number of business cases. There's been 2 business cases, an initial business case and then further drafts that have been provided through Department of Finance to OBR, to Treasury, setting out our case. We've also provided them with details of the savings. So the conversations have been ongoing from 2018. We have not secured, obviously, any kind of agreement to retain the savings, but obviously there's a need, particularly too when our fraud and error in recent years has increased, particularly with universal credit being more of a digital benefit, and also to the pandemic as well too, when there was relaxations in times. So we are keen to reinvigorate those discussions with Treasury to see if we can secure additional funding for Northern Ireland.
Right. Because I haven't looked it up recently, but I think there was a reference to this in the Fresh Start agreement, where there was an agreement from Westminster that there was a pathway, and that it seemed like they were accepting the principle of retaining an element of savings?
We did. It was that we could retain 50% of the savings if we were able to demonstrate that our methodology aligned with that of DWP's.
Right.
In my view, we're demonstrating that at the minute, and we have held it. The figures obviously to compare against the investment that we've made, and we're making a 1 to 8 return.
Right.
In the 24-25 year.
So, and if I could just add that, despite the fact that we haven't received Barnett consequentials in this regard, we have actually performed often better than DWP with less resources in this area. And in fact, DWT would take learnings from us and how we deal with fraud and error. The second thing I'd like to point out to the committee members is fraud and error. The error part is important, because the error part actually is also dealing with people who are being underpaid. So that is another vital service for citizens, and the support that they provide, or we provide to them.
I just want to ask also about underemployment support. And I mean, it's relevant to the anti-poverty strategy, as referenced there. I raise again the case of, I know some of that employment support is provided through statutory services, but there's also an important element provided through the voluntary and community sector. Groups previously had funding from European Social Fund and Shared Prosperity Fund, which has been reduced by 40%. Some of those groups say they're just facing a crisis and have been able to carry on until they have more certainty of longer term funding. The Green Paper, Pathways to Work, indicates support for that sort of work. So I'm sure, is the department engaging with those groups in the voluntary community sector who are struggling to keep their services going? And there is the potential, you know, for statutory funding to support that in the future. But are you engaging with them currently?
I can't say, Brian, that we're engaged with every single, but through our work such as labour market partnerships, we're certainly engaged, and through our voluntary and community division, we will be working with those members of the voluntary and community sector who provide that very important support and other support. As we referenced, the Minister is very keen, as much as possible, that we really sweat our budget to look to see where we can provide employment support. And as Cherry has referenced, there are a number of initiatives, including Invest to Save, but also talking to you, the committee, and talking to other departments and working with colleagues to try and secure those Barnett consequentials that should come across as part of that Green Paper. If my memory serves me correctly, they talk about up to 100 million in the Green Paper, Cherry. Am I misrepresented that?
It's $1 billion.
$1 billion?
$1 billion for employment support.
$1 billion for employment support.
In Northern Ireland?
No, in the UK, but that has a relationship
level,
obviously to the resultant Barnett consequential.
So if you take a percentage for Northern Ireland, you're probably talking maybe 28.5 million per year.
Yeah.
Can I come in on that part, Chair? Just to follow on with Brian, in the Green Paper it specifically mentions that Northern Ireland is excluded from part of the Barnett consequentials because of some work programmes that are already being taken forward in England, Scotland and Wales, I think. It's one of the paragraphs. Is there any concern on that part? Because I don't know where they think that we're getting the money from, especially if they will sanction people on benefits. If they're not going, you know, and attempting to get work. There's that paragraph has me very concerned. Does that mean that you have a concern about the Barnett consequentials for that?
So, and despite having read it a number of times, I just can't recall the specific. You know, I'll look at it again. I think our concern is more at a strategic level than that, because of what seems like a very significant impact this will have when it manifests itself, and at the minute the lack of certainty over funding to deploy supports to those people most impacted, which is why we will be continuing to make in-year bids and working with colleagues to try and advocate for those Barnett consequentials when they come across.
Just last question, Chair. Just as a general one, I'd heard it said that you talk it referenced in your paper about in-year monitoring rounds and additional allocations and the need there for social housing as one clear example. Is it the case that the in-year monitoring rounds are expected to deliver less this year and coming year? You know, there's been a greater effort to try and get more of the budget actually allocated at the start of the year, that it can be spent. Is that an expectation?
There at this stage, there's no specificity with regard to future monitoring rounds because it is subject to movements in expenditure lines across the 9 departments. But certainly the language being used by colleagues in the Department of Finance is that they expect the monitoring rounds this year will be much more modest. And of course, in the original budget paper in April, they referenced that priority will be given to education and health, given the pressures they're facing during monitoring rounds.
Okay. No, thank you for that. Okay.
Thank you, Brian. Melissa, go ahead, please.
You're all very welcome. I was wasted the ratchets, and thank you for your statement as well. It offers clarity to what at times can be very trying list of tables and all the rest of it to follow the figures. But John, in your statement, you had also mentioned about 400 posts. Now, what's the likelihood, or what is the strategy in order to fill those posts, given, we'll say, the current state of affairs where so many posts are unfilled? And secondly, that if there is a strategy for that, where are these posts likely to be located? Are they throughout the north of Ireland, or are they centred again, we'll say, like a lot of them in Belfast, or where?
So I guess our ambition is to fill those 400 posts. We're prioritising those posts given the deficit of people that we have in that area of the business and the critical need to support that area of our business. In terms of where those people are located right now, I can't say for definite because that recruitment is ongoing. But obviously we have jobs and benefits offices and a range of delivery centres across the province. So when we advertise for these posts through the channels, if somebody makes a declaration that they wish to work in the JBO in Omagh and so on, we will be entirely supportive of that where we can, subject to the usual, do we have a space for them, do we have a need for them, and so on. But certainly delivery support, our current infrastructure for delivery support is spread right across the region.
In fact, we'll say to date, have you carried out any sort of survey to determine just how well utilised, we'll say, other areas are in terms of their building and the capacity for locating some of these posts? And in addition, the very fact that as a result of COVID and so on, that we all have learned now how to work from home, how much consideration is given to that as well? And I'm thinking primarily here in terms of the people, we'll say, that are in the western counties, that were, again, we often feel that we're bypassed in many ways, or not prioritised.
There is a piece of work actually looking at our JBO office network right now to understand, quite frankly, because some of that is, like most of the civil services estate, quite an ageing estate. So we're doing a piece of work right now looking at how many people are using that office, both from a worker and a customer point of view. Is there an opportunity to utilise that facility for blended services and so on? Is there a need to upgrade that facility, or in fact is there a need to perhaps consolidate that facility somewhere else? Northern Ireland Civil Service currently has a hybrid working policy in place. So all of our staff can avail of that hybrid working policy, and a lot of that involves remote working from home.
Glad to hear that. And just as you say about updating the facility, maybe if it is to be located somewhere else. As an example, I went to the AIB, or the First Trust Bank in Dungannon yesterday, because there is no facility now in the area where I live, and that again they've updated their facilities there, but at the expense of the more rural dwellers or the more rural towns. And I hope that the same thing doesn't sort of pertain within the likes of the civil service, and that priority is given, we'll say, to those more rural areas. And I'm thinking in particular of towns like Omagh, Strabane, and Skillen, and so on, that they should be treated, we'll say, in a way that whereby, if anything, it's an encouragement for people to come and work there.
Yeah, so I think all of those considerations are part of what is a very large and complex piece of work, and the civil service is currently undertaking this as we speak. But obviously, any of these decisions will be subject to scrutiny from this committee and others across a range of services that the 9 departments provide. But that would certainly be high in our consideration, recognising how town centres, particularly in the rural environment, continue to suffer from increased levels of vacancy and dereliction.
Thank you.
And just to say, it's not just the towns that are suffering, the department are carrying, and I'm very conscious we're going into our next briefing around staff vacancies, 2,500 vacancies. In October, when the department brought forward the very welcome announcement of 1,000 new jobs, not one of those jobs went to Tyrone, Armagh or Fermanagh, and we were told that was because the infrastructure of the department couldn't support recruiting in those counties. So the work you have referenced there, a specific piece of work, is that taken into account to ensure that these 400 jobs or any additional jobs can be equally distributed,
so
both in those areas benefit and the departments?
So this piece of work relates only to Northern Ireland Civil Services rather than Department of Work and Pensions work, which is separate, is NI, non-NI related activity, which is why I can say with confidence in terms of those additional 400 jobs, which is NI service delivery, that there is an opportunity for us to utilise our infrastructure across the region, whereas in the DWP instance, in those additional 1,000 jobs, there wasn't as much, simply because there wasn't the DWP estate there.
What have you done in the meantime to ensure that doesn't happen again if further DWP work comes?
So we are currently looking at our DWP estate because we're reaching a lease end in one of the significant pieces of real estate that we have. So that's a piece of work that's ongoing.
Okay. And in relation to the 400, specifically for statutory social security, what specific measures are being taken to in terms of that recruitment process?
I'm happy to provide a briefing at a future date. Obviously, we're just on the horizon of that recruitment schedule with regard, but as I said, these jobs will go out, and if people wish to work in a location that is near their home and so on, that will be considered against our infrastructure in terms of where we can support people in work, and also where we have the space and where we have the demand.
Okay, thank you. Andy?
Thanks, Chair. Couple of points really, in terms of, just for a refresher of my memory, in terms of the capital allocation and the bids, can you remind me what it was the department bidded for? And outside, obviously you've covered quite in depth the social housing aspect of it, but what else wasn't then met in terms of those capital bids?
I think in terms of the briefing has explained there that there's a shortfall of about 161 million in terms of the bids. So there'll be a wide range of projects. So what we've done is the Minister has given priority to the Social Housing Development Programme in the first instance. So as the briefing explains, he was left with about 77 million in terms of his high priority, and 63 million of that has been given towards new build. There's some money then has been allocated towards affordable warmth and a range of projects in urban regeneration and in culture, arts and leisure. In terms then of the high priority projects that are not met, there's a whole swathe of projects right across the department in all areas that we're not able to give funding at this point in time to.
Can you give me a headline summary as to what those bids, the 400 million capital to the budget were and what was funded? I know you're saying it's right across, but those would have been detailed.
I don't have the bids at hand for this briefing, Andy, because I think we had it at the last briefing. So I mean, if you wanted the details of the bids again, I'll have to get the detail and send it in to you.
Yeah, and then just jumping back to the conversation with Kelly in relation to affordable warmth, you had mentioned in terms of the 2.5 million allocation, that wasn't everything they'd asked for. What was it they asked for?
So they had 5 million brought forward of pre-committed, so we're meeting that, and then Minister has agreed to an allocation of 2.5 million, but they actually requested 8.5 million. So we will go through a process again where obviously we will continue to bid for that at the monitoring rounds. We obviously have a quality impact assessment that will go out as well, and we'll take on board the feedback, and all of that will be assessed then and determined as to whether additional funding can be given to any other areas.
And just in the context of that, the Minister's priority of tackling fuel poverty, where does that align? Is this the only substantive initiative being taken forward by the Department in terms of tackling fuel poverty, or are there others that's going to be funded under this budget?
The affordable warmth is the primary one
Yeah.
in terms of this, and I understand that there's work being done in terms of the strategies moving forward by our climate change team, and there'll be a new business case in and around all of that fuel poverty piece as that work moves forward.
But outside of this reduced budget for affordable warmth, there's nothing else substantively that the Department's taken forward on tackling fuel poverty?
There's in terms of the allocations that I'm aware of, there's nothing specific. As I said, there is schemes of work which will come to fruition at a later date, and then the funding for that will be at a later date.
And then your briefing paper mentions transformation funding. Are you able to maybe expand or elaborate on that? You know, what is currently being developed within the Department in relation to that transformation funding?
So if it's a reference to the NICAS, the wider piece of transformation, none of our DFC bids were successful in terms of transformation. But that does not mean that we couldn't go forward whenever they come out for a new suite of bids. The intention will be DFC will look across the piece and see if there's bids that we can put forward to that transformation fund at that point in time.
And then again in your paper you had mentioned that in the 25-26 resource budget no areas of service delivery are proposed for reduction outside of those areas of service delivery. Is there any aspects that are going to be reduced?
No, so what the intention is in terms of 25-26, Minister's taken the decisions to maintain spending at the 24-25 levels because of the allocation that we've been given, and the proposal in terms of where it will be increased is in the briefing that has been given to us.
More questions, Chair, if you don't mind. In terms of welfare supplementary mitigations, and obviously you've highlighted the approach will be to maintain the current ones, benefit cap and social sector size criteria. Is there any conversations with the Department around taking forward, in particular in year monitoring, any additional mitigation schemes?
The time frame to do that would actually be outside this year. So whilst we could bid for an in-year monitoring round, and if there was funding on the executive level, and that's highly unlikely, it would also need to be recurrent funded in future years, and the time for us to put new mitigation schemes in place, we couldn't facilitate that and have payment mechanisms in place by the end of the financial year.
So at this present time the Department's position is none of the other proposed mitigations in the various reports will be being taken forward?
In this, not in this current financial year.
Okay, and then just jumping across to employment support, there was reference to inability to maintain parity. Are you able to expand and elaborate on that, where we're not maintaining parity, and in particular, can you also touch on the employment support scheme? Is that going to be maintained? Previously there was a consultation regarding that, the cessation of funding, so will the current funding that was previously in place be maintained?
So in terms of parity employment programmes, we had submitted a bid in the budget exercise for 22.9 million for employment support programmes. That's funding that's come really through Barney Consequential, equivalent of what's being delivered by Department for Work and Pensions. That bid was not successful. Minister is keen to use his own budget and, as John said, sweat that budget to the best of our ability to support as many people as we can, but we are really limited with the budget that we have. We will seek further funding in the year monitoring rounds to support people with moving into employment and employment interventions, and that will align with any Barney Consequential also that comes through the Welfare Changes Green Paper. You mentioned there about employment support. So obviously it was a budget decision before. There is an employment support scheme. We have looked at that scheme. It supports a small number of people in employment. It's almost like a salary subsidy scheme. It doesn't provide value for money. That funding could be used in better ways. There's obviously has been an equality impact assessment done on that scheme. I understand that it's to go to Minister obviously for a decision on the longer term whether or not funding will be sustained for that scheme going forward.
It will be sustained?
No, we said
or whether
for a
it will
decision
be.
on whether
All
it will be.
And when will that decision likely be? Do you know?
I understand it's by the end of the first quarter, but look, time frames on that could slip.
Okay, appreciate that. Thanks, Chair.
You've said that money could be spent in better ways. In what better ways do you envisage?
It's quite expensive for the number of people it supports. It only supports a small number of people. I think it's just over 200 people. I think it's almost £3 million a year. A lot of our other programmes are actually delivered with a lot less cost. So the money could be spent to support more people, but through a different way.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back on that? But as I understand it, that scheme is supporting some of the most disabled in our society to be able to get out to work and the benefits associated with that.
I wouldn't have specifics on the details of who it supports.
Sorry, if I may, I think what we're saying here is we recognise the very critical nature of the support that programme provides, and I think what Cherry is saying is we think that critical support might be able to be provided in a more efficient manner, not degrading the support that it has provided or any future programme might provide if there are changes to be made. But that is a decision still to be taken by the Minister.
It absolutely should not put those people in a position where they have to leave their employment as a result of the decision being taken. I just want to put that on record. Thanks, Chair.
And Chair, if I may, just for clarity, because the member asked, so there are no cuts in this. I think what we're saying here is we are maintaining 24-25 spending levels across the board. In some areas there are modest increases being provided, recognising some of the pressures, but that's not to say for some organisation in real terms this won't add to pressures given the context we're in. And just I think it is important on the capital side, our total requirement of capital was some 480 million. Bearing in mind we have inescapable and contractual commitments of 156 million. When provided with 270 million, it really gives us very little room to deploy to other very important areas such as regeneration and so on.
Okay, thank you. Daniel, briefly, please.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to see you as a committee. Thanks very much for taking our questions. Recruitment and retention has been a major challenge for this particular department. It's a challenge for the civil service in every department, but for yours in particular, given, I suppose, the scale and size of the department. What is the main hurdle, in your opinion, as to why there's such issues with recruitment? Is it the case maybe that salary levels aren't competitive enough to attract the necessary skills and talent for the roles that are in question?
Yeah, so I think it's a myriad of challenges. So,
sorry, just before you go, can I just say we're going straight into a dedicated briefing on this, so I just don't want to cross too far into this. This is the finance end of things. Yeah. So, yeah,
I'll make my answer brief as I can, remember. So there's a myriad of challenges. We have a very tight labour market currently, a very competitive labour market. Certainly. Pay and remuneration across a number of our professions and grades may be challenging. That may be somewhat addressed by the recent settlement with regard to pay awards. I also think you have to understand that while the civil service stopped recruiting during COVID, that has created a very challenging environment because we have had ongoing attrition, people retiring and so on. So we have a massive hill to climb to recover that position that we lost during COVID. And as I said, that's further compounded by a really tight labour market and pay and remuneration and probably the fact that we're almost at full employment now.
You said that you are putting extra resources into ensuring that the 400 jobs will attract the necessary talent. Is the budget there, or is there extra finance been put in to ensure that those resources are there to attract that workforce?
So just for clarity, I think what I said was not extra resources. We're prioritising that work. So we're very much looking at that within our overall recruitment timetable, working with colleagues in the Department of Finance and thinking about ways that we can bring those people in as quickly as we can. And
just a final question on that. There's been a lot of criticism about the interview processes when attracting or interviewing people for those posts. Have you had discussions with the Department for Finance to ensure that the interview processes are reliable and that the huge issues with that technology don't reoccur, which actually has put people off applying?
Yeah, there is a very significant piece of work in that area to make changes to the platform, the interview platform that was used that caused some challenges, so that we don't have those same challenges going forward. And in fact, as part of the NICS People Strategy, there's work ongoing around how we might amend our current recruitment processes to make them more agile and user-friendly.
Thank you for that. And just a final point, Chair, just around Built Heritage. I know you just said that you'll write to the committee in relation to it. There's a report out this week that says that our Built Heritage is in a dire state, in fact falling down around us is how it's been described. What is the budget allocation currently for the Built Heritage section within the department?
I don't have that at hand, Daniel. I would need to go away and come back to you on that one.
Is it fair to say that it has been majorly reduced over many years and it is not adequate to deal with some of the challenges that are faced by?
I wouldn't like to comment without having the figures in front of me and actually have assessed them. And I mean, I know certainly there are colleagues within the department more able to speak in terms of how exactly they're allocating the budget and the prioritisation that they have in and around it.
Just in a recent meeting that I had in relation to a significant area of Built Heritage in my own constituency in Surrey Mills, I had a conversation with the local office in relation to this, and I was told that their role is now more of as an advisory sort of position as opposed to actually anything that would ensure enforcement or assist anybody in ensuring that the buildings are protected or invested in any way. In fact, there's a huge onus on owners, and it's very difficult if you have a mill, for instance, to restore that mill without any form of support from the public purse, particularly when it's been subject to considerable amounts of arson and antisocial behaviour. The concern I have really, and this is where I'm looking forward to this briefing, is that I struggle to understand what the role has been of that particular office for a long number of years. And I'd look forward to hearing a very detailed briefing. And I am disappointed, as the Chair's outlined, that on two separate occasions this has now been given a by a ball.
I think as we referenced earlier, we'll go back. I wasn't aware of that. From a finance perspective, and given the wealth of heritage assets, there is across the region. It is important to say, like many of the things that we've talked about, the very significant pressure would put on the executive as a whole if we were to task ourselves with both protecting, restoring and repairing all of those heritage assets. I fear would be not viable for the executive as a whole.
I've no doubt that it wouldn't be viable, but the point is that there's no action being taken in terms of enforcement, and therefore the buildings are literally crumbling because some that are charged with ensuring that our built heritage is protected in accordance with the law and legislation that's there. It hasn't happened, and in effect the buildings have deteriorated as a result of that. So there's a major concern in relation to the department's role in how our built heritage has been protected or not.
I'd be very surprised if the department were shirking its statutory responsibilities with regard to enforcement, but I'll certainly take that back and suggest that data on that enforcement is part of a future briefing.
Just in terms of the briefing, it would be interested, Chair, just to hear the level of enforcement that has actually taken place over the last number of years. A breakdown of those enforcements would be welcome, because I don't believe that there has been many, to be honest.
Thank you, Brian, very briefly. Oh, no, sorry, Kelly, very briefly, and then Brian, very briefly both.
It's just that point of information. I was talking about the Green Paper. It's paragraph 64 in the Green Paper where they talk about the employment and support as a transferred matter in Northern Ireland, and specifically says that the proposals in that paper would only apply directly to the UK government areas of responsibility. My concern would be the figures they talk in that paper for employment support are wonderful, and if we aren't able to get then Barnett consequentials, that would have a huge impact on us, given the fact that we still have to deliver benefits in parity, so yeah, it's just if we could get a feedback of the department's feelings about that statement that's made and what's happening with that.
Thank you, Kelly. Brian?
Thank you. Just briefly, under financial transactions, capital refers to the social capital loan scheme for voluntary community and social enterprise sector. I hadn't heard of that before. Does that, for approved loans, can they be at other, potentially at a favourable rate then. And could we maybe request a briefing paper on that? Just
We can get you some further details, but yeah, that's a scheme that was set up, and it's about 13 million over 3 years, and it was a scheme that was set up in just with the ramifications of COVID, and some of the voluntary community sectors and social enterprises were having difficulty in accessing finance. So that scheme was established for that.
And it's ongoing then?
It's ongoing, yeah, 4.3 million for 25-26, and it was 13 million over 3 years.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, members. Just before we take a short break then, so listen, thank you for your briefing today, and I know there's been a number of issues that have been that you've committed to providing further information on. Committee look forward to getting those, and we will take a quick summary of maybe any other actions to follow up, because there are some of the issues where unfortunately we're being referred to other briefings which unfortunately have not taken place, so that's a circular kind of difficulty that we don't want to be getting extending out. We need to understand the thinking behind some of these allocations, so thank you for that for today. Thank you. Sure. Okay, members, so there's been a number of things there flagged up, in particular that around the heritage, creativity and culture. I think it's really concerning that has been changed. There's budget allocations being made, yet we don't have information about that. So I think we need to follow up urgently with the department on that briefing. Members content? Yeah. Yeah. Anything else, members? Also, the other one that I wanted to particularly flag up was the potential pooling resources between departments, and there was a commitment there that we would get some further information back on that, if members are content.
Just to supplement that, Chair, do you mean in terms of the anti-poverty strategy that's come forward? Because the Department for Communities is obviously the lead department there, and we've been told time and time again that this strategy is forthcoming, but there doesn't seem to be any planning financially for the potential of its implementation.
Yeah, and I know the team have been following up on that, on all those briefings, so can we check if that anti-poverty strategy, because clearly that was a circular kind of a theme there today again as well. So, anything else, members? Kelly?
It's just on that community and voluntary sector piece. While the Department for Communities has responsibility for the community and voluntary sector, my concern is that the support that's certainly being provided by the department to help the community and voluntary sector organisations that get funded through the Department for Communities, there's help being provided. We don't know if the other community and voluntary sector bodies that receive the funding wholly from health or infrastructure or anywhere else, that they're getting equal treatment, and it's something that has me a little bit concerned that the department only sees those that it funds. It doesn't see those that are within the sector, just albeit they're funded in a different way. We're not saying that the Department for Communities has to fund every part of the community and voluntary sector, but I'm very aware of the pressures that are being put on, for instance, community transport. Through infrastructure. Is that policy being shared across the whole of departments? So if we can maybe find that out.
Members content with that? Yep. Okay, members, just take a very short break there and return again in 5 minutes to resume meeting. So take us out of broadcasting, please. Yeah.
Committee Room 29, Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, Sound.
Yep, thank you.
Question for that.
Okay, members, just check if we're back in broadcasting for go any further. Haven't got the nod yet.
Yes, we have to go.
Okay, thank you, members, and we're resuming our meeting then at agenda item 8, and this is a departmental briefing on staff pressures and workforce planning. So, members, the papers for the agenda item start at page 225, and I now would welcome and indeed welcome back the following, in one case, the following department officials to the meeting. So we have John Greer, who's Deputy Secretary, and John, you're getting frequent flyer miles today from committee. And we also have Eamon O'Kane, who's People and Property Director, and Sherry Arnold is staying on with the panel as well. So, John, I think it's yourself again making an opening statement, then we'll go to members as before.
It is, and Chair, you've already referenced Eamon O'Kane joining us, and Sherry Arnold is here. And Chair is very close to our resourcing position because she was responsible for the development of our business resourcing tool, which will be referenced throughout my opening statement. Obviously this is of the highest importance to the department given the pressures we have faced. Our discussion today will focus on the impact of staff vacancies, our strategy for staff retention, our ongoing workforce planning efforts, and of course insights from exit interviews and updates on our recruitment activities. We are the largest workforce in the NICS, accounting for 1/3 of the total NICS headcount. We do have our own People and Resources subcommittee, which reports to our departmental management board and provides the governance and oversight for all people issues, including the delivery of our people strategy, which spans 20 to 25. It is important to say that people strategy now, we are in a process of refreshing that, but we're trying to very much refresh that so that it is coherent with the NICS people strategy that was launched last month. The PRC and Departmental Management Board, as you can assume, are very regularly updated on our people situation and our resourcing pressures given where we are. Obviously, you're aware, and it's already been referenced today, that the department faces significant challenges in staff. These pressures have affected our ability to keep parity with GB in several areas that we've already talked about today, including fraud and error, work coaches, and service provision in the jobs in benefit offices. These vacancies have also impacted our disability career service regeneration projects, heritage and historic site management, public records access and policy development. I will say, this is this is a key matter for the department, something that is talked about on a daily basis with my colleagues across the department and across the civil service. As I've already referenced, a key causation in this is obviously the suspension of recruitment during the COVID pandemic. That's been further exacerbated by our attrition rate, which is currently running at 47 per month. And that is from a mixture of sources, about 50% of which is from retirement, again, given the age profile of the Northern Ireland Civil Service. As of March 2025, the department had 2,551 declared vacancies, of which 1,047 are DWP funded services and 1,504 are for our NI functions. They span all grades within the department's grading structure. And they cover a wide range of roles, again reflecting the fact that all areas of our business are impacted from that. I can provide an assurance here to the committee that the accounting officer and permanent secretary obviously regularly review staffing levels to ensure that we're still meeting our statutory obligations and providing support to our citizens and communities, and that is a discussion that happens on an almost daily basis. On a more positive news, since April 2024, there have been 1,600 declared vacancies filled, compared to 449 at the year end of March 2024. So we are making some headway in this. As I say, it's a big piece of work and we are facing ongoing challenges with regard to a tight labour market and ongoing attrition. In terms of agency and temporary promotion headcount, we have 1,148 staff that are temporarily promoted. That is 14.5% of our workforce. That isn't the highest level within the Northern Ireland Civil Service. It is around the median level within the Northern Ireland Civil Service. There are other departments that are around 18-19% and some that are lower at 10%. Obviously, it's certainly our desire and our objective with the work that we're undertaking with colleagues in DOF to try and reduce those and get people into substantive posts as quickly as we possibly can. There are 3,379 agency staff, which is 29% of the workforce. 1,482 of those are backfilling. The vast majority of these staff are admin officer grade. So of those 379, 2,991 of those staff are admin officers. Obviously, these staff are backfilling vacancies, and they will hopefully reduce as more recruitment supply comes available. Workforce planning is a key piece of work that is constant, but there's a very clear focus on that right now going forward to ensure the department has the resources in the right place at the right time, not only to maintain our statutory obligations, but also hopefully to provide a higher quality of service across a very diverse range of services that the department provides. I mentioned it earlier, Cherry and colleagues took on a piece of work to develop a resource planning tool. This resource planning tool is currently the only I guess, piece of software of its type that's currently deployed in the Northern Ireland Civil Service, and I will say is certainly seems to be the envy of some other departments. And essentially, what that gives us is a very key piece of business intelligence into our current headcount level, so we can see who we have at what grades and what locations, both from a DWP services and a Northern Ireland services. We can also see where our vacancies are, at what grades and in what service lines, and how long those vacancies have been around. Very key for forward workforce planning and a really key tool that we're delighted to have. So in terms of exit interviews, this is a key tool to understanding how well we're doing as an employer, and more importantly, why people are leaving. We referenced that the department has an average attrition rate of 47 leavers per month. 60, as I said, circa 50% of this attrition is due to retirements. A small percentage is transferred to other departments. That is natural, as being the largest. We're naturally an exporter of talent, while we might not like to be always. That is the case, and a facet of being the biggest. The rest are probably lower grades, moving to alternative employment, travel, or education. In terms of the exit process led by line managers and an anonymous questionnaire, the feedback is generally positive for those, which is good, with 78% of respondents recommending DFC as a good employer. And we just launched our people survey for this year. It's a very key piece of our work to look at how we can create an enriched work environment for our people, selfishly to ensure that we can reduce that attrition rate. The other findings of that in terms of why people are leaving include salary disparity with other sectors, insufficient career opportunities, and poor skills matching. It's important to say, and I know members will be aware, that colleagues in DOF own the HR function for Northern Ireland Civil Service, and the findings from those exit surveys and those exit questionnaires are provided to colleagues in DOF, NICSR, so they can react to those, and they're reflected in the NICS People Strategy and Pay Review Strategy. So in terms of a recruitment update, at the end of March, the department had a total workforce of 11,594, which is an increase of 13.4% or 1,300 people on the March 2024 position. Despite ongoing recruitment efforts, the pace of filling vacancies is still slow. The overall demand and competitive employment market are key challenges of this, although planned recruitment are generating some supply, which is why you see the difference in numbers year on year between 400 and 1,400 coming on board. The reality is, given that we stopped recruitment for so long in COVID and we had that ongoing attrition and leavers, and we are the size we are, and the civil service has such a significant rate of employment, we have a significant hill to climb and getting that pace. And despite the very real effort by colleagues at NICS HR to run recruitment campaign after recruitment campaign, when you parse that with the attrition and the hill we've got to climb, this is going to be a problem I suspect that we will be facing at least for a number of years. And that's why that we are working very hard on the people strategy to look at how we can recruit in a more agile fashion, as well how we can recruit in a more inclusive and easy fashion, so we can access parts of the labour market that perhaps in the past we have not been good at accessing, and that is all work underway.
Okay, thanks, John. So some very concerning figures there, I have to say, in general. First of all, in terms of just over a quarter of the staff being over 55, is that typical across the civil service? And how is transition planning happening to ensure that the knowledge that that cohort of staff have is being passed on effectively to incoming staff who are filling those roles?
Yeah, I think it is largely symptomatic of the NICS profile in terms of age, in terms of that succession planning and knowledge transfer. It's something that there's no certainty in this, if I speak frankly. It's something that we are trying to do on a dynamic and organic basis, but when you're faced with the challenges that we have, you don't often have the ability to go, well, Eamon's due to retire next month, so we'll have somebody in place who can succeed him, because the vacancies are right across the board. So as much as possible, we're trying to do this on the fly, but none of this is easy and none of this is ideal, if I speak honestly. So, and it's if I'm speaking as a newly minted official of 6 months, it's a real concern. It's a red flag that we're all talking about, because it's a very complex solution that requires money and time and agility in terms of recruitment. We don't have any of those things, and this red flag is getting bigger and bigger and bigger as we come towards it.
So on the red flag getting bigger, I note that from the month end of March 23, there were 660 vacancies. By end of February 25, that had gone to 2,436, almost a quadrupling within 24 months. On the current trajectory, what are you anticipating the situation will be in 2-4 years' time in March 27?
So I don't suspect that you'll see that same level of increase. And the reason I don't suspect you'll see that same level of increase in terms of that quadrupling is there were certain things that impacted that number. So obviously you had the announcement of the DWP 1,000 jobs, which further added to that vacancy level. As is reflected in the paper, our recruitment is now ramped up from previously we added 400. This year we've added significantly more. We have also now have the NICS people strategy in place. I'm involved in a number of working groups that are working very hard to look at within the year how we might run some recruitment campaigns that are much faster, more agile and more user friendly as a reference. So while I don't have an exact number on that figure yet, there will be an exact number, because part of the people strategy is doing a strategic workforce planning piece for all of the NICS, which is obviously trying to balance the natural attrition, retirement and leavers, and then establish what we will actually need in the future in terms of delivering services with regard to what we expect from future legislation and service requirement. Obviously then you have to factor in the addition of new technology. So Chair, I can't give you an exact number, but I would suspect that will come down and the growth that you see in the vacancies will slow significantly.
But you don't have an actual projection on numbers. Okay, it does concern me, you referenced there in the exit interviews, insufficient career opportunities. And the reason that concerns me, that's something you can do something about. Surely within a department with this level of vacancies, you're able to provide significant career opportunities to your current staff. So are you concerned that your staff aren't seeing that and are leaving as a result?
I'm going to bring Eamon in on this one.
So I suppose there's a few angles to that, Chair, if I may. Firstly, temporary promotion, while it's not a desirable long-term solution, is a development opportunity, and it is an opportunity for people to develop their career opportunities within the civil service. However, the reality of career opportunity is very much dependent on supply of new job requirements and new vacancy positions being advertised. As John has outlined in his brief, Department of Finance leads on the recruitment for civil servants. How many recruitment competitions happen each year is dictated by the budget that is allocated to NICS-HR for that process. If there are insufficient numbers of competitions year on year, there will be insufficient opportunities for people to apply for new jobs. And as John alluded to, we also had a formalised pause of recruitment in 23-24 to help with a budget position. So candidates aren't seeing opportunities to apply. The current Grade 7 competition for general staff that is live right now is probably the first general service competition in over 4 years. So again, if you've been sitting around waiting for a career development opportunity and then there isn't a TP that suits you, an opportunity to transfer to another department, that will be frustrating.
Okay, I'm going to come to members then, and so I'll go first of all to our Deputy Chair, Nicola Brogan. Go ahead, Nicola, and then Daniel and Kelly then is who I have, and Brian.
And thank you again for your briefing here. I was previously on the Finance Committee. This is often discussed, and it was also talked about the level of sickness within the civil service, and often the reason for that was due to stress, the stress of the job, and which is understandable. But I wonder what you're doing now when you're recruiting staff, how to relieve that their kind of stress and new recruits coming in to make it more attractive, to make it more flexible and more inclusive. Are you taking that on board, those levels of sickness and stress that the civil service have recorded, and what are you doing to kind of combat that?
So yes, anxiety, stress and depression accounts for almost half of our sickness within the department. And that's not unique to DFC, that is a civil service position. Yep. It is an area where we, through our people strategy, made a very direct commitment to invest in well-being. The rationale being that most people in Northern Ireland who work will spend about a third of their waking life at work, and that's a good place to try and invest in their well-being through public health initiatives. As a department, we made significant investment in the Mental Health First Aiders scheme. Quite a number of staff volunteered. Over 115 mental health first aider staff within our ranks right now who can provide a first line resource to support their colleagues. We have a broad health and wellbeing resource as well through the Well Champion programme. We tie in with the next Well initiative as well, developed under the civil service. And it's something we constantly monitor. Line managers work very closely with their staff. I think culturally the acceptance of being able to say that it's very stressful has improved. People can now be more honest about what they can do, and the department will then look to see how we support people through reasonable adjustments to help them accommodate a work-life balance. You alluded in the earlier conversation today as well about the value of hybrid working. That has certainly changed that dynamic for a lot of people as well. Every member of staff, or majority of members of staff, can access hybrid working now as an option to help them again achieve a level of work-life balance.
And if I could just take the opportunity, so as recently joining the department and becoming more familiar with the civil service, the range of supports that DFC has is far more extensive than a lot of the other Northern Ireland civil service departments, which is why Eamon is playing a leading role in the people strategy in terms of rolling out those supports to other departments in the Northern Ireland civil service. And as somebody who is a new civil servant, the range of supports we have is actually more extensive than I've seen in a lot of other places that I've worked. Now that's not to take away from the very real challenge we have, which is clearly a product of an organisation that has been understaffed for a significant period of time.
Well, that's fair enough, as long as you can understand that and that you're working towards fixing it. I appreciate that. And the other question I wanted to ask was about the agency workers. So I think from your notes there, there's about 29% of the staff are agency workers, which obviously comes with an increased cost for the department. And although that might be good for agency workers when it comes to salaries, that may be increased, they are you know, they lose out on others. It's a disadvantage to them, as opposed to permanent contracted employees. They don't have the same employment rights basically and miss out on lots of benefits. So I'm not sure that it's always a good idea. So what exactly you're doing to try and combat the amount of, that's nearly 30% of third of almost your whole workforce are agency staff. So what exactly are you doing to try and reduce that there and ensure that they are correctly employed?
Yeah, this is a situation that certainly as a department we would not have wanted to find ourselves, but it's a situation where you have statutory obligations to deliver. Again, a situation where you can't recruit. We're now trying to remedy that through developing innovative, more agile recruitment processes that can get people into the system in a faster way, to try to provide more substantive opportunities. But again, because of the legacy here that we're dealing with, we have a significant way to go. It is important also to state that any business will have a certain amount of agency workers given seasonality, flux in business requirement, but that is not reflective of the 30% that we're currently seeing.
I think that's fair enough. Sometimes you do need those emergency staff or whatever, but 30% is very, very high. And I suppose it also reflects temporary contracts too. You know, I think more should be done there, so they are permanent and just more equitable, I suppose. But again, thank you for your briefing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Daniel.
Yeah, a number of points to follow up on. Obviously, this has been an issue for some time. We've been raising it since the Assembly returned last year, and it has been of concern to this committee and certainly to me as a member of it. Just to follow on from Nicola, first of all, the 3,000 agency staff, is there value for money there and the cost of that, or how much more is that costing than actually filling the posts on a more permanent basis? In other words, is it more lucrative for someone to go via an agency or work directly to the department, which is happening in other departments?
Yeah, I don't have the cost of it to hand, but agency staff don't attract the same benefits. So a substantive member of staff secures a very good pension outcome. So from an overall cost perspective, employing agency staff is actually a saving to the department. It doesn't attract that. There is a small, obviously, additional cost for the contracts that are in place, to have those staff in place. But obviously they are on the civil service pay scales. So for the individual, there's no difference in salary, but they do lose out. That agency member does lose out, obviously, in terms of pension. I have to say, you know, there's been the additional 1,000 jobs for DWP. The DWP jobs is a really good outcome for the department, bringing in over 150 million a year into the Northern Ireland economy. Our ability to use agency staff has allowed us to flex up at pace when we couldn't wait on recruitment competitions. It's not where we want to be, obviously, but it is a really good outcome for the department and particularly too for the wider economy.
I'm just wondering what the agencies are doing to attract that level of workforce that are doing the work for the department, when in actual fact it's more beneficial for the individual to work directly for the department. What's going on there that like, if I was an agency staff and I realised there's more benefits to work directly with the department, what is happening there, and why is there no direct
I would suggest longer and more complex recruitment processes.
So there is an issue with the recruitment process.
Could I interject? So this is something we've been looking at for some time, Daniel, because obviously we invest a lot of time training and developing these agency staff. Some of them will have a few years of experience and we're really keen to retain them. So we are doing some work with our colleagues in Nix HR and actually engaging with these staff directly to understand why they don't apply to competitions when they're offered, and if there's a reason that maybe they're not interested. Now, in reality, some people in the agency world, it may not suit them to be in full-time employment because they plan to travel, they plan to go back to education and so on, and we accept that. But we're very keen to see how we retain what is a very valuable part of our workforce. As you rightly say, it's quite a large percentage. The other thing, just and this is the cycle of this problem, is about 1,400 of those agency staff are backfilling vacancy. So again, if you don't have the supply, you can't address the issue, you can't allow the agency staff to apply for the post, and you can't reduce the number of agency that you're actually using.
Yeah, and just temporary promotions is another hot topic and has been discussed numerous times. 1,148 temporary promotions. How does a temporary promotion, just for the sake of the committee, how does a temporary promotion come about, is the first question, and what is the longest temporary promotion currently in place with the department?
Firstly, a temporary promotion can come about for a number of reasons. One, it can be purely because of a vacancy. Someone has left and there's not supply. It can be because we have a new piece of work or a specific project that needs to be taken forward, and we need to put some resource into that, and we might have to create some temporary promotions to deal with that. There's a process to temporary promotion. It goes through a merit principle as well. People are asked to apply. There's an application process. There's an assessment. People are appointed on the basis of merit. In terms of length of temporary promotions, we do have some temporary promotions that have been in place for more than 4 years. And again, it ties back to the cyclical problem of we haven't had supply. So we will have grade 7 staff in our department, which is a really critical senior leadership role, who've been TP for more than 4 years because there hasn't been a grade 7 competition in more than 4 years. So
it's the lack of competition that's leading to
the lack of competition is a major factor in that.
Okay, and you said more than 4 years, but from freedom of information requests that I've put in at various points, there's some departments that have temporary promotions in place as long as almost 10 years. Is that the case in your department?
So there's an issue you have to be careful of in analysing the data on temporary promotion. So if I take a temporary promotion tomorrow, I could do that role for 6 months, and then another temporary promotion could come up and I could move sideways. So I could have several temporary promotions in my career that on data alone will look like I've had one successive temporary promotion for a long period of time, and it's not easy to disaggregate that as we go forward. But the other side of this challenge is that even when there is competition, and as we've seen in most recent experience, very few of the competitions that are run actually meet the number of vacancies. So we anticipate even with live competitions that are out there right now, they will not meet the number of vacancies that are in the civil service. So we're constantly in a deficit position, and at the same time 47 people a month are leaving the department. So it is a challenge, and it's a black hole that started in the pandemic, and it's going to take a while to fill that hole.
Okay, more widely, just in terms of the vacancy rates, how is it affecting the day-to-day running of the department generally, if there's such a vacancy rate?
So I think as I referenced at the beginning, there are a number of areas across our business that are under significant pressure, and I've mentioned retaining parity with GB across our benefit support and some of the support we provide in terms of disabled persons, support for fraud and error and so on. They are challenged by that, which is why we're so pleased that we received 16.9 million of ring-fence funding to recruit 400 people. But there is a number of what I would term discretionary activities which would provide a level of additional quality on top of our statutory obligations that we would very much want to deliver, that we simply don't have the resources to do. But I would stress again that in terms of the Permanent Secretary keeps a very active brief on all areas of the business to ensure that we keep the staff in place, to ensure that we are maintaining and meeting our statutory obligations. Now, that is not to say that that is not without its challenges on a daily basis, but that is our focus, to maintain our statutory obligations.
Just a final point, Chair. So the department's come under a fair amount of criticism in relation to the pace in which strategies are delivered, and there's a number of examples that I could name. How has the vacancy rates affected the development and delivery of strategies within the department?
So there could be so to answer your question succinctly, undoubtedly in some instances we would have been able to do things faster and in a more agile fashion if we were resourced to our full established headcount. But as you will be aware, the development of a new strategy and policy is subject to a number of interdependencies, whether it be legislation from GB or in fact the political process itself. So there's a range of things that can impact the time it takes, but certainly resourcing is amongst those.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up then to Daniel's line of question there, so within general employment, normally when people have been so long temporary in a job, they acquire the right to full-time substantive post. Does that not apply in terms of the temporary post that we're discussing here, and why?
So there's a nuance here. So if somebody is appointed under a a full-time temporary contract and it extends over 4 years, they are automatically deemed to be a permanent employee. That does not apply to agency staff, nor does it apply to temporary promotions.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going on then next to Kelly, please.
Thanks very much, folks. I suppose I should declare an interest. My other half is one of the early retirers out of the civil service, not Department of Communities, I have to say. But looking at the figures at the moment, as you say, there's a significant number of people who are 55 and over within the department. Given the fact that if somebody's been in the civil service for a long time, it gets to the stage where it's not worth their while working because their tax hit on their pension is a lot. So I'm just wondering, that modelling system that you've brought forward, is there anything there? I know that it could say tomorrow, I mean, you could retire, but that would presume, I'm sure, a retirement age, whereas anybody can really take the retirement from 55. Does the modelling take into account a concern about that number of people who are 55 and over who could leave and all that skills?
Yeah, it does. We've got ages built in.
Yeah, and I'm assuming because of employment rights, there can't be a cull on early retirements. You can't force anybody not to take early retirement.
Certainly not a departmental resource or capability. That would be a central DOF NICS recruit.
Okay, I know that whenever, years ago for instance, whenever the Ulster Museum was being refurbished, I know that they did a cull on people over a certain age and others were allowed to retire and take early retirement. But you've answered one of my questions earlier about that sort of differential between the cost of agency staff and others. But to be honest, can I just ask a very clarifying question here? You've identified there that the department had declared at March 2025 2,551 declared vacancies. Are all of those being backfilled by agency staff, or what number of those are actually empty roles?
So we currently have about nearly 2,000 vacancies being backfilled. About 600 of those are substantive NICS staff working in the delivery of services, and about 1,000 odd of them are for the agency work, the DWP work that we're doing. So no, it's not 2,500 additional jobs on top of the work that's being done.
Yeah, so the pressures are still there,
yeah,
and you've almost got all of them backfilled, but there's still a percentage that are free there. So can I ask a question then? Department for Communities is responsible for employment support. Is there anything being considered within the department to enable an apprenticeship to provide that backfill of people to come through the system to actually enter the civil service through that new recruitment process?
There's actually, we'll talk about employment support programmes as well that run through a work and health group, but as a department we took a lead 2 years ago in the development of what's called the Operation Delivery Apprenticeship Scheme. So we did a pilot programme, not just for DFC, but working across 5 departments, introducing a day release academic supported programme for new entrants to the civil service. They came in as apprenticeships as AAs, administrative assistants, and then after they completed their apprenticeships they became administrative officers. So we, in that pilot, recruited about 60 people across Northern Ireland into that programme, supported by Belfast Met College, and they spent 4 days of their week in the workplace, learning on the front line, and then 1 day a week developing a City and Guilds qualification to support their role. From that pilot, about 40 people completed and moved straight through into permanent roles as administrative officers, and in fact before we even finished the pilot, someone had even moved on through temporary promotion on to higher grades. We are now, having evaluated that programme successfully, teeing it up to run again in the coming year. At this stage, we believe we have about 200 vacancies across the civil service that we will be able to offer positions in at a minute for Operation Delivery Apprentices, and we hope to make an announcement later in the year on that programme going live.
And if I could add to that, so one of the key problems here is a people and labour supply problem, and considering our long running high levels of economic inactivity, this is an absolute key focus for the department and something that we will advocate for publicly, but also with colleagues. And like the Operational Delivery Apprenticeship Scheme, we want to see more of these brought forward, and we want to see DFC and other civil service departments very much adopting these at pace. Because we believe this is a key remedy to the very difficult situation we find ourselves in.
We also have the Green Paper, which talks about 16,
Absolutely.
17-year-olds not being able to access benefits. So if they're not in employment or training, we could in Northern Ireland be running into significant difficulties, whereas the recruitment issue could actually offer for some, not all, an opportunity for the workplace. Is that something that you're gearing up then to enable that to happen, so that the civil service is an entry point?
Yes, and not just obviously within the department, but we are in a position in the current labour market where actually we need to start growing our own. That is one of the opportunities we have to focus on. So we've talked about the Operation Delivery Apprenticeship Scheme. The department is also working with NICS colleagues looking at IT apprenticeships. We've been bringing forward a programme around workplace psychologists. And then this is all parallel to the additional work that our Work and Health Group colleagues delivers around things like Job Start programmes, programmes to target the economically inactive. So there is quite a lot of effort going into this space.
Because we've seen success on that with different sectors. So say, for instance, the accountancy sector, you'll see people who are being supported through their learning, and then there's a position at the end of it. It's almost got to that stage with the civil service. And one of the things that the Green Paper has brought forward is try a job for 6 months. Now, given the amount that it would cost to train someone to be able to work within, say, for instance, Department for Communities, is that something that the try for 6 months, is that something that you guys are thinking about adding into that recruitment?
It's not something we formally have at the minute. Obviously, we offer work placements and opportunities for people to come in and experience work in the civil service. But I think probably going forward, and John's alluded to the new NICS people strategy, I would suggest that we are very open at this moment in time to what our future approaches will be to increasing the supply chain into the civil service.
And my last question, sorry, Chair, on this one is, I appreciate that the people who are currently working in those agency roles have been through exactly the same training that full-time or part-time staff in the civil service have been through. So we have people who we've invested time in, who can do the job, but it's that moving over from the agency over into the full-time work. And as you said, Cherry, to be honest, the pension, being able to access a mortgage, all of that is easier if you're in a full-time job. Is there, because they've been through all the training, is there any way, I know it has to be fair employment, absolutely support that, but is there any way that they can be easier moved over into full-time employment? Do they still have to go through the full?
Unfortunately not.
Okay.
The merit principle doesn't allow for that, so they
Does
have
the
to go
merit
through.
principle apply to the agencies?
In terms of how
You know, so when they're bringing people onto their books and they're sending them forward for the positions that need filled, are they applying any of those merit principles at their side?
They won't be bound by the Northern Ireland Civil Service merit principle, but what they do is they tap a latent workforce that are looking for employment opportunity. We employ them on that basis, that they have made themselves available. But unfortunately, we don't have a mechanism right now to say you've done a really good job and we'd like to make you substantive. We have no mechanism for that. Right?
Just to be succinct, this is something that I've personally explored because it would be a really quick fix. The problem is we can't take an assurance that what the agency have done provides a compliance with the Northern Ireland Civil Service merit principle.
Oh, thank you very much. It's an issue. I know that employment rates are very good in Northern Ireland, so it is a competitive market out there for jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Brian.
The Chair, right, so looking at Table 1 and Table 2, what is your overall summary of the situation? It looks to me like the situation is getting worse in terms of the number of vacancies that are. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. It is correct, but I think what you have to appreciate, Brian, is that the data is somewhat lumpy because you will have a constant line running across, which is your line of attrition of 47 leavers per month. But then what you will have is from time to time you will have recruitment competitions that provide a lump of people to address those vacancies. So there are a number of merit lists that are currently due to land, which should provide some supply to the department. So Eamon has referenced there's a grade 7 competition which is currently in process. There's also a grade 6 competition. There is a merit list due to land at some stage later this year for AO. So again, that will affect how the data looks. If I was to provide you with I guess an educated view, I would say overall the situation is set to get better, but not significantly better, because the attrition is constant and the recruitment competitions are still taking a significant period of time. There's not enough of them, and that is why there's a significant amount of work going on at an NICS level to see how we adjust our method of recruitment to make it more agile and faster to deliver supply.
Yeah, and sorry, if I could just add as well, for shorthand, quite often we talk about general service competitions, and those are the ones that bring in the largest volume of staff. But it's not to create the impression that there is no other recruitment happening. As a department right now, we'll have at least 40 competitions in the pipeline for specialist roles. So obviously they don't attract thousands of applications. They're very niche, they're very specific. So we are constantly chipping away at that number as well, trying to bring it down and fill those specific vacancies that aren't general service.
Yeah. Certainly, I mean, over the last couple of years, there's a marked increase in the number of vacancies being reported to HR services. I mean, it's gone 600, 1,300, 2,400, you know. So it's quite a stark increase. It's close to doubling and doubling again, you know. Are all posts needed? Has there been an assessment done, you know, given the number of vacancies that the department is carrying, at any stage is there an assessment, you know?
Yeah. So the vacancy control process is quite rigorous, where a leader, whether that be a deputy principal or so on, or staff officer, will declare a vacancy. There is a process whereby they have to create a business justification, including is there a budget for this member of staff. That goes through quite a rigorous set of gates to essentially, I guess, appraise is what is being said in that process actually true, fair and correct. Depending on the seniority of the position, that will involve individuals like Cherry, myself and Eamon. So to answer your question, yes, it is quite rigorous, that process. At a more, I guess, strategic level as an organisation, given the challenges we are facing and the challenges the Permanent Secretary is facing in ensuring we achieve our statutory obligations, there is a constant view taken on, do we actually need to be doing this, and do we need people to be doing this, or could they be better redeployed somewhere else?
Yeah. I mean, well, to refer back to our former time, when you and I were in Belfast City Council, I mean, there would have been efficiency savings each year, you know, looking at posts, are they all needed? You know, can there be savings made? I just wonder, is that process happening, or we're just carrying all these vacancies? And effectively, the fact that vacancies aren't being filled becomes almost like an efficiency exercise, because are they all needed? I mean, I think that question has to be asked.
We did a project within the department just over 2.5 years ago, a people and resources project that looked at all posts across the department. From that, we were able to strip out around about 100 vacancies, no longer required. Work had changed.
Okay, that is happening from time to time.
Yes, and in addition to that as well too, around about 70-75% of our vacancies are related to operational delivery. We have really robust processes in place where we actually go out to offices with a team in the department that are work measurement analysts. So they go out and they look at all the work steps and process and benefit claims. We apply that then with forecast volumes and a complementing factor, that's a Treasury approved complementing factor to resource our business. We do that twice a year, and in doing that twice a year, if benefit areas or pension areas are due to reduce, we can reduce staffing in those and redeploy staff accordingly, or else we can notify the business area that they'll have a pressure in terms of the level of resources that we have. So that allows us actually to make sure that we have the right level of staff in place in all of those operational delivery areas.
And one of the key things within the People's Strategy is the development of a strategic workforce model, which essentially will do that critical analysis of, rather than some type of one-in, one-out situation, do we really need that function, that person, that post? And that's obviously going to take consideration of the digital transformation that's an ongoing project across the civil service.
Okay. Can I ask, what is meant by backfilling? I mean, around half of the agency workers are backfilling. So what's the difference between backfilling and a normal vacancy?
So in essence, the vacancy exists. We don't have a substantive member of staff to put it, so the agency member fulfills that role. So they fill the gap of the permanent member of staff that is absent.
Are all agency workers not backfilling?
No.
So that's what I'm trying to. What's the difference? So is it seen as a critical post that can't be left vacant?
Yes. So we will backfill posts that we need to fill. But agency workers may also be there on short-term projects. As Cherry alluded to, our Department for Work and Pensions contract agency allows some flex, so as the demand for activity increases, we can use agency to help with that demand. As it decreases, we can reduce that agency headcount again.
So for instance, the department from time to time assumes responsibilities for a number of things. Following the Grenfell disaster, the department assumed responsibility for building cladding remediation and so on. So that is a time-bound project that needs staffed up. So that's the difference between backfilling and a time-bound project and where agency might be deployed.
Okay, and well, last comment,
Very
Chair.
briefly, Brian, please.
Yes, no, I don't understand why we can't recruit more of the agency staff. I know you've addressed that question, and I know some are short-term employment they're seeking, but I mean, some agency staff are with us for what, considerable time?
More than 4 years.
You know, so sorry, what did you?
More than 4 years. Some
right,
of them
more
will
than
be.
4 years. So I don't understand why they can't become permanent staff. You know.
It is a difficult challenge, and it is something that the department has had a couple of goes at in the last 3 years, but it requires a broader understanding at NICS level in relation to the merit principle and the current recruitment practices that we have. We don't currently have a lever to make them substantive staff.
But they can apply, obviously, when there's a recruitment.
They can apply when there's a
exercise.
recruitment when there's a competition. They can certainly apply.
Right. So it's just encouraging them to apply.
Yes.
There's a piece of work ongoing, as Eben referenced earlier, to understand why people who have been agency members of staff are not going for, oftentimes, the jobs that they're already doing.
Mm-hmm. And they'll have better terms and conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. Melissa.
Well, you'll be relieved to know I only have the one question.
Good morning, Melissa.
Just from what's been presented in relation to agency staff and the unfilled, we'll say, posts on the civil service, my question is just that how often is the non-recruitment to these posts or the recruitment of agency staff used as an instrument for balancing the books within the civil service itself in terms of balancing their budget?
Sorry, from a finance perspective, are you so
Yes.
so I would say finance is the financial implications are an absolute byproduct of the decision. The primary decision is we have an urgent, critical operational requirement. We do not have an opportunity to draw from an existing NICS supply chain. We do not have an opportunity to draw staff in via TP. That leaves us in a situation where it's agency. The decision to use agency is never ever motivated by the financial consequences of that whatsoever. And it's never a conversation, certainly, that I have been party to or seen.
And to what extent would the same apply then to the non-recruitment of staff to posts
Yeah.
that are vacant?
We do have a limited budget. We have a certain level that we will be able to recruit to this year, but there will still be in excess of that, around about 1,000 posts that we can't fill.
So therefore it still happens,
It's
depending entirely on the budget.
yes, but the business areas will be aware of what their budget is for the year and the level that they can recruit to, and they may not be able to recruit all of the posts that they need.
And that speaks to the challenge that the accounting officer has in balancing his financial envelope with his requirement to meet his statutory obligations.
So that very often then, that if we look at this figure, we'll say of 2,500 unfilled posts, they couldn't be filled anyway. Even if you had 2,500 people available, we'll say to take them up.
Yeah, so I think
Because
it's
the budget's not there for it.
Yeah, I think it's understanding of that 2,500 posts. So that's declared vacancy. So that is what the business area has told NICS-HR to recruit. It's effectively planned recruitment. So it will include a mix of posts that are backfilled through agency staff to permanently fill TPs that are already in place. There will be a level of vacancies in there that are affordable within the business area. So it doesn't reflect the actual effective empty posts in the department. It's a level that has been declared to NICS-HR to fill. It's planned recruitment.
So essentially, in an ideal world where you required 10 John Greers and you didn't, you would go to NICS-HR, you declare 10 John Greers, they find you 10 John Greers. The situation is we have a legacy now where we have 10,511 vacancies or whatever it is, but in the interim we have sourced those through TPs and agency backfills. So that's where the difference is. That and within the remainder, we actually don't have the budget to fill all of those posts.
Thank you, Daniel. You're looking a brief one now.
Yes, it's just in relation to the assessment of the workforce. You provided a lot of detail today, John, and your colleagues, and we appreciate that. How many staff that are working for the department are currently working from home on a full-time basis, or what is the breakdown you can provide to the committee in relation to hybrid working?
We don't have an actual figure, but what I can say is we do not have a home working policy. If you work for the department, you currently work to the NICS hybrid working policy. We will have staff who are in the office every day by the very nature of the role that they perform. They have to be in the office. But the majority of staff can avail of the hybrid policy and will be working on a mixture of office and home location. But we don't offer a home working policy.
And do we know what the ratio is? I know what you're saying, you don't, but for those who are currently working hybrid, do we know what the breakdown is of in office and at home?
So the department's guidance on this is we would like to see our staff in at least 20% of their working week in the office.
20%?
20%. Sorry, 40%. Sorry, 2 days 40%? A week. 2 days a week. Sorry.
Okay, and could we get a breakdown, possibly, you mightn't have it here, but could you give us a breakdown of the numbers of people and on which scale? So how many staff are working 40% in the office and 60% at home, for instance?
We don't record that information because it would require almost like having a head count on the door every day or some mechanism to get people to count in and out.
In terms of effectiveness, because I'm conscious what Cherry said about calling out to offices, etc., and assessing the workforce and ensuring that I suppose they're doing the job that is required and fulfilling it. How is that assessed? How is there accountability for those individuals if we haven't got a breakdown of who's working where and when?
In those particular circumstances, if the staff who are coming out to work the complementing model, staff will be required to be in the office that day. So it's not there are conditions within the hybrid policy that say actually there are days when you have to be in the office if we ask you to come in. So to support the development of new staff, to attend training, to be part of the staff complementing process, you will still have to come in those days as well if we need you to come in.
So within the current policy, the overarching North Star is it is a hybrid working policy, it's not a home working policy, and an operational requirement may deem that you will be required in the office 5 days a week, 4 days a week, or 3. That is subject to the discretion of the manager in his or her assessment of the operational requirement, which is why we have very significant portions of our population that are in the office 100% of the time.
Okay, I still would be keen on the numbers, but I understand that you don't have it. But I would have concerns about how you ensure accountability for the 60% of hours worked at home. But that's.
Well, just to be clear, the hybrid policy is not an abdication of line management responsibility. If you're line managing a team to deliver a service, you're still expected as a line manager to be making that staff accountable for the work that they deliver. Yes, it is difficult to say every building on a given day has this number of people and in this number of home, because we deliberately decided not to put a sign-in, sign-out process in place for that. But the Permanent Secretary and the leadership team have always been very clear. For the future sustainability of this department, everybody working at home is not going to help us actually develop some of that cascaded knowledge exchange that the Chair referred to earlier about people who are retiring. Allied to that, and just to pick up, Chair meant to pick this up earlier, we try to use the knowledge base within the department to develop the next generation workforce. So we run enrichment sessions for our new staff officers and deputy principals, and what we do in those processes is encourage that face-to-face engagement so that you can learn firsthand from someone who's already done the job. So we're very committed. As a department, we took a very strong early lead in the concept of a minimum 40% attendance, and we continue to push for that. But it doesn't abdicate the requirement that line managers still need to make sure that staff are delivering what's expected of them, whether they're in the office or at home.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, John, I just want to tack back on one issue that you touched on in your briefing around the impact of staff vacancies, and you referred to in passing disability career service. What has the impact been on that service?
I'm going to refer to Sherry here if you can.
there's obviously a shortage of staff in that business area, and there has been delays in some of the clearance times. I don't have specific details to hand, but I obviously can engage my colleagues in the operational area and provide something back to committee.
Do you have an estimate to what percentage, if it was at full capacity, to what percentage is currently being impacted?
It can fluctuate, and obviously the additional staff now that we've got, or the additional money now we've got to bring in benefit delivery staff, whenever we knew we're likely to get that in the draft budget, the business areas have been told to consider staffing up. I know that some agency staff have been brought in to a number of business areas, so I wouldn't like to provide a figure. If it's okay, I'll come back with obviously the latest position.
Okay, I'd welcome the figure. I would also, and you maybe can answer this, why was the decision taken to allow that service to be impacted rather than some other service?
In terms of recruiting up?
In terms of providing a career service for those with disabilities? What I'm saying is there's a concern. So in the context that we're in relation to the British government's announcement that they're going to withdraw support to disabled, can you see how that would make people very vulnerable and frightened that they were seen as one of the first places, rather than those people needing that service and being protected, that has been allowed to be diminished?
Where we've secured the additional funding for benefit delivery, we've allowed all the business areas to avail of that to the levels that they are planned at the minute. I think one of the challenges, and John alluded to it earlier, was that because of the levels of attrition that we see, because of the additional funding that we've got, that there's a risk that we will struggle to fill these posts this year.
And I just, Chair, if I may, so I have seen some of the numbers that you're looking for in previous internal briefings, so happy to come back with that. I just would say that every area of our business is impacted, including those where we have a statutory obligation, and that's probably again connected to the fact that we have significant levels of people on stress and anxiety because people are working long and hard to deliver their statutory obligations. Disability Career Service and a whole bunch of areas are not at the size and not doing the frequency of touch points that we would want to do. And that's something that Cherry's reference will be addressed through the 400, but we will come back. But I just want to be sure that the Disability Career Service is not being treated in any way differently than all of the other, and I would say is probably being treated more sympathetically given the constituency that it's addressing.
And I think that's important. I think that's an important concept that is kept under review in that sense. Okay, thanks for that. So listen, that's been a useful briefing. Obviously, worry and concerns, and we will continue to keep an eye on that given the impact it's having on delivery. But thank you for your briefing today and for the commitment to send in further information to inform committee. Thank you all. Thank you. Members, just to tack back again slightly, members, there was one issue in relation to the finance briefing that I wanted to pick up on, was around, we've heard reference to earmarked funding as well as ring fence. That seems to have crept in a little bit, so I'd just be keen to get an understanding as to the difference between earmarked from the department in writing, the difference between earmarked and ring fenced and how those impact, if members are content.
Yeah, sure.
Yep. So coming out of that session, members, there's a number of things committed to. Is there anything else members want to pick up on?
This ties into both sessions, Chair. The 400 jobs that are coming available was mentioned earlier that it's not recurrent funding. Yeah. I just wonder, is that going to be filled then with agency staff? Because if it's not recurrent funding, then they would have to let people go at the end of it. Maybe we could ask the department just to clarify. I know the work plan, or the work, what is it called? The work planning that their workforce planning, that they're doing, is aiming towards that 400. But if it's not recurrent funding, any other business would say, well, if it's only for a temporary period, we'll bring in agency staff to cover that, or fixed term contracts for that. It's just to find out from the department how they're planning to recruit on that basis.
Content with that? Yeah. Okay, members. There's another issue there that occurred to me throughout the briefing, and it's in relation to the agency staff and some of the members, somebody's asked the question about why are people choosing agency over and above, and I think we see this in health a bit as well, where some people are saying they want to travel or whatever. But I would wonder, is there any plans within? So there's clearly a change in dynamic within the workforce where younger people have different expectations or a different capacity in terms of young women, maybe with families. I wonder, is there any work going on within the department to acknowledge those changes and flex within the contracts? If the substantive contracts are being looked at in terms of, do they provide the flexibility to people? Because if you're trying to fill a post, it's of little difference if that is, say, for example, 2 part-time people filling the post or one. But I wonder, sometimes are we operating with legacy contracts that aren't meeting the hopes and ambitions of younger people, and that's impacting given the age profile. So if members content, we right to ask the department if there's any work going on in relation to that issue. Yeah.
I would just as well, Chair, be keen to explore some of the stuff that Brian had raised around, how many of these jobs are actually required. It's a difficult one to assess if they can't tell it. I'm in favour of hybrid working and that work-life balance, but if they can't provide us with details as to how many staff are working in the office 40% and how many are working at home 60%, how are we ensuring proper accountability? How are we ensuring that they're doing the maximum amount of work that is required, and therefore that we're getting value for public money in terms of that important resource? That would just concern me a bit, because we actually, and I know this is the case for many departments, but we actually have no figures as to what percentage of the civil service is working from home and how many days, etc. And I think some analysis around that would be helpful. And also just to touch on what Brian did ask about ensuring that all of those vacancies are actually, are all those jobs required? When's the last assessment and what was involved in that? Because it's okay just saying we need all these jobs, but if, like, I've heard various things we all have about issues within the civil service, but it's
so on the effectiveness of people working from home, I would certainly also be interested in it, but I have to say I come at it from a slightly different angle. In a department that needs more staff, I wonder if people were able to be managed, and could people, say, potentially with caring responsibilities or disabilities, could they effectively join? Would that be a removal of a barrier to the workforce if they could do more work from home? So I think it's the same question, but from a slightly different perspective. And it was clear that they were saying they didn't have the information, but if hybrid working is now a new thing, then I do think we need to decide how are we going to then assess that and monitor it going forward. So it's probably not simply sufficient to say we don't have it. If it's a bigger factor now, then what plans are being put in place to ensure that going forward that can be managed? And in fact, I'd be an advocate for it being increased if it brings more people into the workforce.
Yeah. Sorry, Chair. If it would help, I'll liaise maybe with my colleagues in finance, and we'll just see if we can get some indication, feedback, and then we'll draft up about how we can get that inquiry in and just make sure that it's consistent with their view as the, if you like, the sourcing and the employing department.
It's really a question around the effectiveness of it. If it is the case that it is proving effective and needs to be widened, then fair enough. But if we have no data or information at all around it, then it's very difficult to make that assessment.
So content for the clerk to, in the first instance, take a look with finance to see how that, Kelly.
To be honest, that's what I was just about to suggest, as we get in contact even with the Department for Finance, to ask them what are they doing to streamline that NICS HR the recruitment process. Mm-hmm. It takes them 3 to 4 months from the day that somebody says we need to advertise these jobs to anybody actually getting a position. In private business, you turn that around in a month. How long do you have to give your notice for? You're getting the job, so we'll see in a month's time. It seems to be a very strung out, onerous, and I know that in Northern Ireland we do have a commitment to fair employment. Yeah. Why can other businesses do it, but the civil service ones just seem to take forever? So I'd be quite keen to find out, if the finance committee's already discussing stuff like this, they may well have done work on it. I know that some of the people who are agency staff are not applying because they can't be bothered going through all that recruitment stuff, because you can get into the civil service through an agency.
That's right.
Yep.
That's
So-
pretty much what they said earlier. That's one of the reasons.
Apologies. So I'll liaise with Finance Committee on streamlining recruitment and improving or assessing whether it's still fit for purpose. The same with contracts and whether those are, if we're still working with, if you like, legacy contracts that don't meet the needs of the modern worker, and monitor and review the hybrid working policy as it stands. Is that okay?
And could we ask specifically the issue about agency staff, whatever's the appropriate way to ask it, but what efforts are being made to assist the recruitment of current agency staff? I mean, 29% of staff, it's a shocking statistic. And some of their 4+ years,
And there's a potential ticking time bomb within that area about people in later years then not having, because it's been mentioned here, the pensions and things. So, and do people fully understand that impact? Do we understand as a the ability to pay for future care in years to come? So there's a piece of work.
If their salaries inhibited here, if they're saying they still have to work within the civil service salaries, and as if they're getting some way above and beyond the way they can in other sectors.
So the query there is what's being done to see about moving people out of agency and into more
Well, I
substantive.
suppose we have to say reduce the percentage of work staff who are currently on agency contracts, which is a way of
substantive contracts, direct employment.
Yeah.
And I think this is slightly different from health, because I might be wrong, but my perception is that a nurse, for instance, can earn more as in an agency.
There's an incentive.
But whereas the civil service, it's the same money, but the benefits aren't with it.
That did seem different. Yeah. Okay, members, thank you for that. So, number of pieces there. Clerk, you're content that you have all the detail? Yeah. So, agenda item 9, members forward work programme. It's contained at page 229. Do members have any comments, or are you content to note the forward work programme? Content, thank you. Any other, agenda item 10, any other business today, members? No, thank you. And then agenda item 11, date, time and place of next meeting. Our next meeting then will be at 10 a.m. on Thursday, 15th of May 2025, here in room 29.
And the informal sessions on Tuesday then, before that. Yeah.
Is that this Tuesday?
Yep.
Yes.
Right enough. Yes.
Informal, maybe just send a reminder around on that informal as well, please. Okay, members, so that our meeting now adjourned. Thank you.
It's next Tuesday. We've got a meeting with Northern Ireland Federation for Housing Association.
Committee Room 29, Sound.